Tywin Lannister had a difficult choice to make, to ride out and meet Robb's forces in battle and abandoning their defensive position in Casterly Rock, or fall back to King's Landing and help defend the city from Stannis Baratheon. But what if Tywin Lannister abandoned the Rock? What if her grandfather thought it'd be better to go to King's Landing to keep Joffrey on the Iron Throne? Something terrible disturbs her mind, like a hunch or feeling she couldn't really shake away that something bad will happen. But this is war. Of course everything bad always happens in war. His face did not radiate any emotions other than strange calmness. Surely Robb was trained to hide his emotions. Nevertheless, she heard the hollowness in his voice when he finally answered. "You're safer if you're far from King's Landing when the war is over." "Do you mean, if Stannis comes out as the winner?" Robb did not answer, but from his eyes Myrcella could see he hoped her to stop asking. She lowered her eyes from Robb's face to the table. Light from candles and braziers fell to the table, illuminating the remaining pile of parchments. One of them caught her attention. Robb's handwriting curled small and tight in sharp strokes written either with confidence or passion, penned thickly in black ink. It was the kind of handwriting people will spend time to appreciate the beauty of the written form. The letters were stringing together, word by word, beautifully intertwined to form a sentence. He realized where her eyes were staring at, because he pulled the parchment, looking rather shy. "Stuff I was working on," he mumbled. For a moment he looked doubtful, but then held out the parchment to her. "Perhaps, you can give me your advice again, Princess. I was born among the bodies. I was hurried forward, and sealed a thin life for myself. I have shortened my name and walk with a limp. We cannot live on cold blood alone. In a dream, I am engendered, and the moon is just the moon having a thought of itself." She looked up to him, stunned, then back at his writing again. "I am a wolf masked in the scent of its prey, and I am driven, hawk-like, to the dark center of things. I have grasped my eager heart in my own talons. Somewhere there are phantoms having their own funerals over and over again. Somewhere, a tired man won't let go of his dead wife's hand. Death is just a child coming to take us by the hand and lead us gently away. Fear is the paralyzing agent, the viper that swallows us living and whole. And the devil wears a crooked badge, multiples everything by 3. Do you write this yourself, Your Grace?" "Yes. It is beautiful." I didn't know you enjoy poetry." "Well, truthfully, I don't consider what I write is poetry at all." Robb exhales. "I just enjoy writing, stringing words on empty parchment, and after what I saw in this war, it only increases the need to pour my thoughts on paper, you know. I think I understand that. You need something to occupy your mind, to take off some of the burdens away." "Something like that, yes." The comfortable silence embraced them for the third time before she found her voice again. "I liked it, really." He gave her a small smile. "Thank you." At that moment his stomach was ringing loudly. Robb looked down to hide his face behind his hand. "Gods! I don't look so regal right now, do I?" He forced himself to laugh as he stood up from his chair. "I think it's time for me to taste that soup." That night she heard Robb talk longer than before. He still looked tired, sleep-deprived, but his face radiates a merriment she cannot refuse. She noticed how his hand occasionally rose to rub the bridge of his nose, how his fingers tapped on his goblet when he told her the mischiefs he did as a child, as if he was afraid of being looked down upon by her. But why would she? She enjoyed listening to his stories. She had never seen anyone so eager to tell his life with sincere happiness. She even honestly did not know there was such a happy childhood. He grew up surrounded by nature and animals, to be outside almost all the time. Robb told her about the long summer they had in the past years and the bountiful harvest for the upcoming winter, of how his education as heir apparent began when he was 4 years old, reading, writing, and counting. At 6 he started training to wield a sword and in archery, along with Jon, who is also of Robb's age. His half-brother became his best friend, a confidant, and also competing friends. When Robb excelled at every sport and swordplay, Jon is better at counting. Both of them loved reading, and only to Jon, Robb showed the poems he wrote. Lord Eddard groomed Robb to be the next Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North by included Robb in his council, as young as a 10-year-old. His father made Robb stand by his side for hours a day as petitions and disputes were heard. Rob listened and watched, did not complain even though he could hear the sound of his younger siblings playing from the yard. With a little laugh, he told her that he used to be jealous of his younger siblings every time they boasted about their adventures in Wintertown or Wolfswood, while his legs ached from standing at his father's side. It was only when he grew older he began to understand why he was treated differently. He assured her there were no dragons sleeping below Winterfell, rather than the castle was built over a series of natural hot springs, and there were no ghosts in their crypts. He and Sansa did not like going down to the crypts, though, where the Winter Kings and their ancestral lords of Winterfell were buried. Jon and Arya were the braver ones who used to play hide and seek among its stones crates and glaring stone faces. One day, Rob told her, Bran took them into the crypt where Jon and Arya were already waiting with flour covering their bodies from head to toe. Unfortunately, Jon stumbled over a rock and fell face first, breaking his nose in the process while trying to scare them. It was not in vain, though. Sansa and Rob screamed and ran out of the crypt, believing to see actual ghosts. Later when they returned to the castle, Jon and Arya were captured by Septa Mordane and received a long agonizing lecture from Lord Eddard. Myrcella tried to remember rows of grey houses built of logs, undressed stones and thatched roofs when Rob told her about Wintertown. It has a market square with wooden stalls for produce and goods at its center. Every time he played there, nearly all the sellers slipped an apple, or strawberries, sometimes even candies, to his pocket, whispering how they appreciated the Starks of Winterfell. He always comes home with a full stomach and a bag full of souvenirs. His mother, however, made sure the sellers got coins for every item her children went home with. He'd later learned that the sellers refused the coins. I learned a valuable lesson that day, Rob said, smiling, that nothing is more despicable than respect based on fear. Respect is earned, not given. She sensed that Rob was very popular among the residents, considering how many people respected his father. Moreover, Rob is the reflection of his father with a strong sense of justice and honor. And there was this girl in Wintertown, we used to play hide and seek. Her father was a shoemaker, I think. We talked almost every day and sometimes I brought Jon to play together. What I liked about her was she never treated Jon differently. She even called him Little Lord, which made Jon blushed. No one ever called him Little Lord before. We spent time outside the smoking log, the alehouse, peering inside to make up stories about the lives of the patrons. That sounds nice. What's her name? He looked ashamed. I forgot. I didn't see her again when my studies started demanding me to be more present in Winterfell. Will you forget me too? It felt strange. She did not want to be forgotten by him. No, he answered firmly. Never. The candles began to burn even thinner as she was amazed to hear Rob's story. She gasped at the thought of Rob on his first wild boar hunting in the Wolfswood when he was 11. A boar managed to break through them and butting Rob's horse almost knocked him to the ground. Fortunately, spears finished off the boar before it could have a chance to tear up his horse's leg. She was touched to hear how Maester Lewin found one of Rob's poems and instead of teasing him, the Maester gave access to more poetry. Rob made him swear not to tell anyone, of course. She laughed when Rob told her about how he and his siblings took turns carrying the newborn Rickon and he wet them all with his pee. She applauded excitedly when Jon found the direwolf pups in the Wolfswood and Lord Eddard allowed each of them to care for one. Grey Wind was the first to approach Rob and licked his fingertips, bonding with him emotionally. The direwolf namesake comes from its color and speed. There was a moment when Rob realized he was dominating the conversation. He looked mortified, but Myrcella was more interested to know Rob as he is, other than his king in the North persona. After all, there wasn't much she could say about herself. For the first time she realized how shielded and superficial her life was before the war. She asked herself, how does it feel to dance in the rain, to immerse your feet in the mud so deep that your feet stick in your boots? How does it feel to lay on the thick moss lining the Godswood floor, feeling the cold wind on your face? To fall asleep lulled by stories about giants and cannibals lurking beyond the wall, and of the Targaryens' dance of dragons. When the candles finally burned out and the remaining light came from the fire in the braziers, Rob reached out and helped her up from the chair. His congeniality made her comfortable and drowsy, and she liked the warm, safe feeling. He took her back himself to her pavilion, calmly slipping her hand behind his arm and walked her through rows of his men's pavilions. Now most of them have retreated into their warm tents. The moon shone brightly that night, like a big fireball in the sky. She did not want to be separated so quickly from Rob. "Thank you," she said quietly when they reached her tent. "I really like what you wrote, too. I hope I can read your other works, Your Grace. It is beautiful. You've been kind enough to share it with me." His smile was warmer than the summer sun, more beautiful than the prairie he had shown her. A kind of smile that makes you couldn't look away. She could feel her cheeks burning under his gaze. "Good night, Princess," he said. "Good night, Your Grace," she replied. For a long time she lay on her pallet, watching the flames dance on the candle she left on. She was sleepy and realized the night was getting late, but refused to yield to drowsiness. She had never felt so warm and fuzzy in her life. Pia lay beside her, yawning. "Pia." "Yes, milady." "Do you love Walton?" Instantly her friend's eyes opened wide, the face turned red. Myrcella took Pia's hand in hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I knew that I cared about him," Pia answered, blushing prettily. "Isn't it funny, if she didn't run away she wouldn't be here now, resting on a pallet in the middle of the woods, surrounded by strangers, and thinking about a man who had never bothered her heart and mind before. She should not feel happy. Perhaps, she should be afraid. Even though she still does not recognize the foreign feeling that haunts her, she knows she did not want the feeling to end. For those who are not involved directly in the war, being in a military campaign is arguably boring. There was not much she could do, and repeatedly hearing the preparation of men who are going to the battlefield made her uneasy. Several times she heard Pia and Walton argue. Walton wanted to prove himself by going to war, while Pia wanted him to stay with them in the camp. She could not completely blame Pia. She heard her friend cry at night, before sneaking out of the tent and not returning until hours later. Their relationship seemed tenuous for the past few days. Pia always shot Walton with a sad look and he, too, glanced at Pia, if he thought no one was paying attention, with an expression of a beaten man. "Let's go for a bath." Myrcella pulled a reluctant Pia by hand, hoping to cheer her up. "Leave Walton in the tent. It's midnight and it's dangerous out there." "Don't think you can get rid of me, girl," Walton gruffly warned, sticking his head into their tent. If only Walton knew she had spent the night alone out there, without escort. Midnight falls like velvet that covered them all in black when they left her pavilion, headed to the vernal pool. Walton followed behind them without saying much. She knew Pia and Walton had argued again earlier, of wanting to march with the men on the morrow. For a stupid knighthood, he's better than most of those entitled knights. Pia grumpily told her as she laid a cloth on the ground to put their spare clothes and stockings. "He talked nothing but his dream of being knighted while I was at Riverrun." Myrcella giggled. "Sometimes I think Sir Patrick gets so annoyed that he finally gives Walton the knighthood right then and there, just to keep him quiet." Both of them burst out laughing. "Do you know that I can hear your conversation?" Walton exasperatedly called from behind a tree. Pia sighed and helped Myrcella out from her dress. "He can marry a nice girl with that knighthood," she whispered glumly. "A good maiden, who'd give him sons and daughters." Her remark somehow made Myrcella sad. "But you're the best for him. I've never seen Walton as happy as when he is with you." "My princess is too kind." Pia smiles as she stripped Myrcella from her small clothes. "But sometimes, life doesn't go as we wish. I believe one day he'll get that knighthood he craves so much. I'll be happy for him." Myrcella sensed what Pia didn't tell her, that Pia had the same unrest, nagging feeling of wanting the best for the man she cares about, yet at the same time she understands she might lose him in the process. She looked up and could see dozens of scattered stars in the black sky. It was like a song for the eyes. The faraway lights called to her heart, promising of another lifetime. But who needs a lifetime without Robb Stark? She thought. "I understand your feelings," Myrcella whispered to her friend. They plunged into the water, splashing on the edge of the pool while talking quietly so Walton could no longer eavesdrop. The 30 meters wide pool is surrounded by thick bushes, with large trees whose giant roots entered the pond like tangled snakes. They bathed calmly, talking in low voice, covered in the shadows of trees and bushes. Pia goes first to the surface of the pool to dry off. Myrcella heard him grumble again, making her turn her head. "What is it?" "I'm so stupid. I forgot to bring my spare dress." Wear mine to fetch yours and take another one for me in the tent. But, milady, comma. Go on, Ursula urged her. It's just a dress. I am very, very sorry, milady. Pia, it's all right. Use my spare and be back soon. Pia blushed furiously as she helped herself into Ursula's spare gown, which was at least 2 sizes smaller for her. I will tell Walton to stay here. Before Ursula could answer, another voice vibrated from across the pool. Take the guard with you. I can look after the princess. Both girls shrieked and glared to the darkness of the night, only to see leaves waving in the wind. Then from behind a tree which roots stick out and into the pool like a tangle of threads, a figure comes out of the shadows. His slow movements barely make a sound, other than waves of rippling water on the surface of the pool. Ursula's eyes glowered at Rob Stark in the pool. He was looking calm and even slightly blushing. Hi, he sheepishly greeted her, like a deer caught in a hunter's snare. You, she almost screamed in disbelief, forgetting her courtesies. I was here first, Rob hurriedly explained. Please don't be angry. He gives a look of apology to both girls. Go on, now, fetch another spare cloth for the princess. She will be safe here with me. Pia looks like she did not want to leave. She glanced at Ursula, who nodded despite being agitated at the prospect of being alone in the pool with Rob, before bowing and immediately running towards the camp. I didn't see you, she protested when Pia had disappeared into the night. Here the whole time he gestured to his surroundings. Even so, welcome, and enjoy bathing with me. She was a little annoyed because he was even teasing her. How could you? You let us into the pool when we were naked. Rob choked back a laugh. I closed my eyes the whole time. How do I know you are not lying? He looked hurt by her remark. Looks like you have to trust me, just like I trusted you the night I found you alone here. I thought I better just stay still and close my eyes until both of you are done bathing. Are you alone? Where are your companions? Aren't you supposed to have your king's guard with you? She looked around to their surroundings, afraid someone would find them in such a compromising situation. It's just me. The water defined his well-toned body, making her a bit weak in the knees just by seeing his bare chest. She tried to maintain her composure, reminding herself not to blush by constantly looking away to water lilies floating near them. Rob, on the other hand, was calm and didn't show any discomfort. A thought came to her that this is not the first time Rob was alone with a naked woman. It was not uncommon for the sons of lords to play around with women, be it commoners or highborn. It made her feel somewhat panicked. He grew close to where she stood in the middle of the pool, disregarding the fact that she was naked. When he was close enough, she turned her back to Rob and sank deeper into the water. You don't need to be afraid, he called softly. I am not afraid, she countered, but her voice was shaking. Where is Grey Wind? You prefer my direwolf to me? Yes. I'll pretend that I was not hurt by that. She could hear the sloshing sound when Rob moved to her, the hammering heart inside her ribcage threatening to jump out of her chest. She kept her back to Rob with both hands hugging herself. Can you please not getting any closer? The sloshing sound of him moving stopped right away. All right. Don't be angry. Shouldn't you be preparing for battle in your tent? A man needs a bath too, even in the eve of war. And your part of the woods is lovely. She wanted to smack herself for how stupid she was, questioning herself of why she repeatedly trapped in embarrassing situations in front of Rob. Once her shock and anger subsided a bit, the realization that she had not properly addressed him made her want to drown herself in the pool. She opened her mouth to apologize when Rob's voice preceded her again. What are you doing, bathing in the middle of the night? She could ask the same of him but chose not to pry. Pia said it's safer for me than during the day. Oh. Smart woman, she could hear the odd cheerfulness in his deep voice. It seemed like an eternity, standing in the middle of the pool with Rob. She still had her back to him, worried to face him. How did you get this? Out of sudden, he touched her shoulder blade, sending jolts throughout her body. She did not want to answer, but it came out of her mouth anyway. Joff, she whispered, feeling dread crept to her spine just by saying her older brother's name. What did he do? Though she cannot see his face, she recognized the anger in his voice. How she wished Pia would quickly return with her spare clothes. Long time ago she had anticipated disgust and anger when someday her lord husband sees her. Disgusted, because she came to him a broken woman. Anger, because she was not strong enough to prevent it. The Maesters have tried various methods and ointments to rub out the scars. Their efforts paid off. Now there are only 5 silvery smooth lines stretching from her shoulder blades to her midsection. The skin has healed many years ago, the discoloration is now glowing wet under the moonlight. Joffrey was fond of certain blades even when he was a little boy. Are you disgusted? Why should I be, when you're perfect to me? She chokes back the sudden lump in her throat, her head throbbing from holding back the tears from falling. Why do you always cry? Rob's voice from the night he was angry taunted her again. No one ever told her that, not even her mother. Even though his sentence felt like consolation, it warmed her heart nonetheless. Don't cry, she scolded herself, as tears welling in her eyes. Using one finger Rob traced one scar, from one end to the other, sending her goosebumped at the touch. With all her might she had to resist the urge to arch her back at him, to give in to his gentle touch. Slowly, he grabbed her shoulder, directing her to turn around. Her tears fell unexpectedly as soon as she caught his eyes. She angrily opened her mouth trying to defend herself from any mockery he might make, but Rob didn't say a word. He simply uses his thumb to wipe the offending tears from her cheeks. For the 3rd time now already. No, please. I hate to see you cry. She was hiccuping through her tears, humiliated by the situation. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I was not there. Rob said. What? She blinked, unprepared to receive soft-spoken words. When he hurt you, I'm sorry I was not there, he repeated behind gritted teeth. Astonished by his reaction, momentarily she forgot how Rob had stood right in front of her. That little fool, he didn't finish and looked away. No one has ever shown anger at Joffrey's treatment of her. When Joffrey hurt her, she was immediately sent to the Maesters to be treated, but nothing happened to her brother. King Robert once reprimanded Joffrey, yet it didn't stop Joff from seeking her. No one truly cared. The Maesters were silent every time they saw her wounds, and even her mother thought it was just a child's play. Only when Uncle Jaime intervened and stood guard at her door, did Joffrey's visit really stop. Bloody hell. Now I wish I was the one who marched to King's Landing. She pulled away from him, bending her knees so that she sank deeper to her chin in the cold water, hiding from his stormy eyes. Please give me one reason to hate you. Just one. Why are you so kind to me? Should I not? Will it be easier for me, if I am not kind to you? Sadness clouded his features. The world would be a better place with a little kindness, wouldn't it? And you make it best by being in it. Milady. Pia's voice boomed in the dark woods, panting as she had run to and from the pool. She had discarded the dress Myrcella let her wear, with a bundle of Myrcella's new clothes on her arms. Walton was right behind her, bowing to Rob before quickly standing behind a tree. I will close my eyes again, all right. Rob withdrew to his spot behind the tangled mangrove roots. He even turned his back to them, to give Myrcella more sense of privacy. What did he do? Pia whispered angrily as she helped Myrcella out of the pool. He didn't do anything. But you are crying, milady. Pia threw Rob's back a chastised look. It's, Myrcella sighed, feeling the tightness of the cold night air. She trembled. It's happy tears, I think. Pia dried her body with a cloth and put clean clothes on her. When Myrcella put Rob's surcoat on her shoulder, she glanced at the pool where Rob was still standing with his back to them. I heard you will leave on the morrow, your grace. I am. He tilted his head slightly without looking back. Forgive me for I disturbed your bath. No, you were right that you are here first. If anyone has to apologize, it'd be me. Also for being rude to you. You are never rude to me. His generous reply once again embarrassed her. Good night, your grace. I wish you well on the morrow. Good night. Myrcella. He said her name ever so softly, she almost missed it. The next day men lined up to march. It was a rather cold morning. They were numerous, lined up neatly with grim faces under their iron helmets. It was unusual for her to go out of her tent to see the men, but this time she opened up the overlapping canvas door and stepped out. For the first time the men ignored her, too focused on facing their fate on the battlefield she became invisible. Gods know how many of them will not return. Her heart already mourns for them, whispering prayers. Rob rode in the front row along with Grey Wind, but when their eyes met he trotted towards her direction. He was accompanied by Lady Brian in her cobalt blue armor and Sir Patrick Mallister in his purple and silver. "I wanted to see you," he said, without preamble. "Who knows if I meant to be dead on the morrow?" She was scared by his words, not knowing if he was joking or not. "Don't say that. Please." She took Rob's gauntlet hands, it was cold under her touch. She wished she could touch his skin, to feel the warmth of flesh instead of steel. "Come back to me," she pleaded. She wanted to say it aloud to him but didn't dare to. Rob bent down from his horse and slipped something into her palm. He didn't say a word, other than seeing her with his blue eyes. This was the first time she sent him off to war, fighting her family. "Be safe," she finally managed to say. I will be waiting." "Are you going to sing the Song of the Seven for me?" he grinned. She blushed. "Always don't die. Come back to me." He opened his mouth to reply, but Sir Patrick interrupted. "Your Grace, time to go." Rob turned his attention and nodded. In the distance, someone blew a horn. Footsteps of thousands of men at arms echoed on the hard ground as Grey Wind howled from the front of the line. She watched Rob's back trotted farther and farther away on his horse until he finally disappeared behind the hills. That was when she looked down at the paper Rob tucked into her hand. Carefully, she opened the neatly folded parchment. A buttercup fell from inside the letter as Rob's handwriting greeted her. "The woods are lovely, dark and deep. But I have promises to keep. And miles to go. Before I go to sleep. Notes. Yes, my Rob writes poetry. Credits. Nothing is more despicable than respect based on fear." A quote by Albert Camus. The poem about Rob's experiences of war was titled "Do Not Speak of the Dead" by Cecilia Longpart. The poem Rob wrote to Ursula was titled "Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening" by Robert Frost. Chapter 17. Chapter text. Essay. She was tired, she wanted nothing more than to crawl beneath her blanket and sleep. The purple welts covered her thighs, her midsection and even now her forearms. For a long time she had learned to be quiet, not moving a muscle, nor conveying any emotion as they beat her. Each passing moon, the beatings became more severe as Rob got closer to them, securing victory after victories. Sometimes she even lost consciousness only to wake up in her chamber. A maester or two would smear her wounds with various ointments so as not to leave any marks. Her scalp aches every time they styled her hair in an elaborate southern style, full of pins and gems. The hairnet they put on her head was like an invisible shackle, confining her. She felt like there was a bird's nest on her head. But she has survived through each passing second, minute after minute, day after day until weeks turn into moons. Soon, 12 moons have passed followed by another. And she stayed, and she waited. The clothes she wears were dominated by Lannister's colors, showing that she is theirs, but as a hostage or Joffrey's betrothed, she doesn't know. The Tyrells hoped to make Margaery the queen, the sole reason they ran to King's Landing to bend the knee even before Renly's corpse went cold. Sansa knew it was only a matter of time before she was put aside. She did not complain, of course, or feel sad. Or should she? She knew that Stannis Baratheon was near, somewhere down the King's Road, perhaps with Rob on his side. The young wolf, they called her brother now, and her heart soared with joy. Even hearing his nickname, the people in the Red Keep were terrified. He never kept hostages, they say, confident by having the Kingslayer and Princess Myrcella as prisoners. The same fear oozing from every corner of the city. Margaery Tyrell told her the Great September of Baelor was never empty of worshippers. The numbers of gold cloaks patrolling the streets were doubled, and curfew imposed. Everyone still remembered the last time King's Landing had fallen, of how the Lannisters looted and raped and put most people to the sword. But holding a sword or not, every human being is the same. When their adrenaline peaks, mixed with anger and bloodthirst, the mentality of the mob had only one purpose: destruction. No need to wait until the day Rob and Stannis pulled down King's Landing gates. Sansa had felt the horror when dirty hands pulled her down from her mare. Their angry screams seemed to come from another world. Right next to her she saw how the mob took down Sir Preston Greenfield, a member of Kingsguard, easily stabbed and hacked to pieces. "He used to beat me too," was Sansa's thought as she saw the mob drag his body away. If only there was no Sandor Clegane, perhaps she, too, would be dead and left in some dark alleys in Flea Bottom. Sometimes she still dreamed of that day when the bread riot broke. Joffrey has a violent sense of justice, fueled by entitlement. His answer to the screams of his hungry people was to shoot them from the gate of the Red Keep. Adding the shortage of basic foods cut by the Tyrells, the city was in a vengeful mood the day they rode to see Princess Myrcella off to Dorne. Now the common folk preferred Margaery Tyrell as queen when her family brought food, forgetting the fact it was Renly and the Tyrells who cut supply lines to the capital. The Godswood was eerily quiet as always whenever she came to visit. The red leaves were falling without anyone care to clean up. Stone bench overgrown with moss, and shrubs covered the path to the weirwood tree. Alder and black cartonwood trees surrounded the area, overlooking the Blackwater Rush. It was long forgotten. No one in King's Landing worshipped the old gods. Her body was still aching all over, but she chased away the desire to sleep. The bruises on her thighs made her difficult to kneel by the tree, so she sat on the stone bench. Silently, tears flowed down her cheeks as she remembered her father, Arya, and her household pupils who were murdered when Joffrey ascended the throne. Let Robb come, she prayed, always the same blind devotion. Lord Eddard taught his children how the weirwood tree watched over them. She needs to believe it now. The wind blew the leaves, one of which fell on Sansa's lap. Gagging at the sudden desire to scream and claw at her hair, she never complained whenever the sharp tip of the hairpins grazed her scalp. She will endure it, believing her nightmare will end when Robb arrives at the gates of King's Landing. Robb will come, and Robb will kill you all. Sansa used to prefer her mother's new gods to her father's old ones. The songs they sing for the Seven, the sharp, sweet smell of incense and flower offerings laid at the feet of the statues gave her such calmness. Now everything changes. The Godswood and the grim face carved to the weirwood tree was the only solace friend she has. At this time of the day, Sansa imagined how many candles lit at the warrior's altar. Surely the stranger gets a lot of prayers too, for people begging for protection and a quick, painless death when battle falls upon them. The Queen and Joffrey thought she is stupid, but Sansa better be labeled as such. Without anyone to talk to, or to be trusted, Sansa learned to be quiet and become invisible. She would sit quietly for hours, knitting, or pretending to read, but her ears listening to every conversation around her. That way, she knew how Robb had devastated the Westerlands, killing Lannister and its followers, and prevented Tywin's army from reaching the capital. Her heart had been swelled with pride just then. She also knows how busy Tyrion was going around the city, something to do with an old pyromancer she spotted at the Tower of the Hand. The combined threat of Stannis and Robb caused the whole city to panic. The only thing uplifting the sullen spirit was the arrival of a group from Dorne, who fulfilled Joffrey's invitation to fill a place in his small council. Sansa knew better that the Queen and Tyrion were afraid Dorne would go to Stannis' side. The failure to send Princess Myrcella almost cost them another kingdom in the realm. When she was recovering from Joffrey's beatings, dinner was sent to her chamber, boiled eggs, fried fish, pumpkin soup and warm honeyed milk. It was the only good thing that came out of Joffrey's abuse, to be left alone. Her family name was the only thing that kept her alive. If she was not a Stark, her head would have been side by side with Stannis' scouts fixed on spears along the ramparts. The Queen also seemed disgusted by her blue and purple blotchy skin, a tinge of yellow for the almost healed part. Cersei became increasingly impatient every time she laid eyes on Sansa. A slightest discontent put the Golden Queen in such an awful mood, and she'd choose to spend the entire day drowning in wine. "Swear to me that your brother is as honorable as your father," the Queen once said in her drunkenness. "But even when you knew he was honorable, you still let Joffrey chop off his head," Sansa thought. "What are you afraid of, Robb?" Nevertheless, once her wounds and bruises have healed or can be covered by her dress, Joffrey always wanted to see her in the throne room and the Great Hall. It's been months since she was no longer seated on the dais with the other royals, not even when she is still Joffrey's betrothed. Pitying gazes became common to her that she no longer bothered by the stares and the whispers accompanying her in the Red Keep. Every social interaction sent dread in her, but there was also a desire to be included, to be wanted. Is this what Jon felt, she thought, alone under the dais, forgotten. She thought of her siblings all the time. The hope that one day she could meet them again, to be home in Winterfell, made her not throwing herself from the highest tower in Maegor's Holdfast. But of Jon, she thinks of the most. More than once she toyed with the idea of naming her son Robb, after the bravest brother she dearly loved, to spite Joffrey. That is if they ever get married and she is not set aside in favor of Margaery. But then a memory came to her, of a dark-haired boy, slim and eyes so grey it almost appeared like black, leaning closer. A bastard is not a knight. He does not deserve to kiss a lady. His face was ashamed and apologetic before running away. She was about 9, and Jon 11. They were in the yard playing maiden, dragons, and knights. Arya never wanted to be the maiden, so Sansa always happily took the role. Robb was the knight, and Jon, she never let Jon to play the knight, not when she was playing the maiden. Does Jon still remember it? She thought sadly. Is he holding a grudge against her, for always calling him a half-brother? How she must have hurt his feelings by telling him that he belongs in the Night's Watch, and had been happy when Jon said he'd go when father went to King's Landing. She was cruel. Only now did she realize that perhaps life wasn't easy for Jon, and she had always been on her mother's side whenever it came to Jon, a bastard, being in Winterfell. She remembered Robb and the shoemaker's daughter messed up behind a bush, or a tree, thinking that Sansa would never know. She did, though, even Arya, who rolled her eyes and made a puking sound. Robb was tall and strong and handsome, the eldest and heir, whose legs little Rickon clung to when he was afraid. Arya had remarked that boys would grow up stupid, even their Robb, when it comes to women. Sansa thought the opposite. She did not lie when she told the queen that Robb was as honorable as father, even more. She also recalled how one day her brother was looking for Jon and found them in the reading chamber. Robb was visibly flustered and shaking. They spoke in hushed tones, but Sansa hid behind a bookshelf to eavesdrop. Then why didn't you do it? There was amusement in Jon's voice. Because I don't want to put a bastard in her, that's why Robb was upset. I've seen how they treated you, even mother. Why would I want an innocent child to go through it? Recalling the memories made shame crept from the pit of her stomach to her cheek. Why couldn't she realize it sooner that Jon was really suffering? Why did she even add misery to Jon's life, when he didn't choose to be born as a bastard? She had treated Jon like he was an outsider rather than a brother. Now she was a highborn treated like a bastard in King's Landing. The gods have taught her humility. The world is nothing like she thought. Oh, she had learned it the hard way. If she came out of this place alive, she'd find Jon and begged for his forgiveness. A long time ago she prayed at the feet of the Seven, inside the little September Eddard Stark built for Catelyn Tully, begging for a chance to escape the north even just for once. Not that she doesn't love her homeland, Sansa's head was full of stories and poems and songs promising all the best life could offer. People often said Northerners are used to a hard, difficult life. Their environment made them that way. The north itself exceeded the other 6 kingdoms combined, sparsely populated with vast wilderness and snow mountains. The air is always cold, the breeze cruel for unsuspecting strangers. Even during summer, it'd occasionally snow. They rarely had visitors, especially singers and musicians Sansa dearly craved. During her lifetime in Winterfell they have had only 2, both spent a fortnight before departing back south never to come back again. When she was old enough she asked if Uncle Edmure might want to take her as a ward. Or perhaps, her parents would let her be fostered by Aunt Lysa. Or one of her aunt's husbands Bannerman. House Royce was not so bad. She had read stories about the Knights of the Vale who fought in their sparkling and dashing armors. Perhaps she could meet them one day, or betrothed to one of them. It'd bring House Stark significance good, wouldn't it? She begged, and she prayed, and she never stopped wishing. Your father will find you the best man, knight of your dreams. A lord, her mother said. Someone brave, gentle, and strong, her father promised. In her young mind, who else would have met those criteria if not the dashing knights from the south? She should not have heard their conversation. She should never have left her warm bed and the cozy feather blankets. She should not have come to her parents' room. She even forgot why she was looking for them now. And Robert is determined to join our houses by marriage. It was followed by Rob's name and not hers that came out of her father's mouth. It was supposed to be Robb and Myrcella. How then it turned to her and Joffrey, she did not know. But she was grateful when Lord Eddard accepted King Robert's appointment as Hand of the King. She had been overjoyed, drunk of dreams when she was brought to King's Landing. Now the dream tasted of acid. Perhaps she was not supposed to oppose her father's decision when he tried to send Arya and her back to Winterfell. Perhaps she should have trusted her father more than the Lannisters. It was too late now. Lord Eddard has died, along with all of her friends and household guards, her scepter, even Arya. Joffrey was every girl's dream, handsome, tall, and regal, with hair as golden as the crown itself. She had admired him, loving him with all of her heart, thus trusted Joffrey and Cersei. They repaid her trust with her father's head and threatened to give her Robb's too. If there is one thing she learned in King's Landing, it was about the importance of family, the best thing she had, and she took it for granted. The sound of footsteps made her rush to wipe the tears away. She took a deep breath to calm herself before she turned to see a Kingsguard was sent to fetch her. Usually it was Meryn Trant, the lowest of the lowest scum she has ever known. A vile man hidden by the glamour of his armor and white cloak, undeserving. He took the most joy in beating her. The most painful, too, never holding back. Today it was one of the Kettlebacks that found her in the Godswood. The moment she knew her lone time was over, she slipped into her mask of courtesy and calmness. It did not take long to find out even the friendliest chambermaids kept certain intentions, and all of them reported to the Queen. All of the Kingsguard are also the Queen's men, except for the Hound and Sir Barristan Selmy. The Hound prefers to mock her though, and Joffrey dismissed Sir Barristan the day he took the Iron Throne. The King summons you. Without a word she stood up and fell in behind him. What other hardship did my betrothed go through this time? Osmond Kettleback shrugged dismissively. Every time Joffrey sent someone to fetch her, he was always in a sour mood, in need of a punch bag. Sansa hardened her heart while they went through the halls of Maegor's Holdfast in silence. It felt like a very long walk. Each step she took led her to Joffrey's torment. But at least, every blow she received meant another victory for Robb, and she could live with that. However, the news that awaited her in Joffrey's chamber was not about Robb. Rumors broke out that Sir Barristan had found Stannis and pledging his sword to the rightful and worthy king of the Iron Throne. Joffrey was furious. How could Stannis take that old man? How, he was screaming when Osmond Kettleback shoved her inside the chamber. He is old. He let my father die. How could my stupid uncle let him into his service? Cersei was sitting at the end of the bed, looking rather bored. He's just an old man. Nothing much, she said. Behind Joffrey, his sworn shield was standing with his scarred right hand at the hilt of his sword. The Hound did not spare her a look when she came. A man of few words, Sandor Clegane mostly curses or spat angrily to anyone dare crossing his path. Lady Sansa, your grace. Osmond Kettleback announced. She curtsied to a sighing Queen Regent, and to Joffrey who didn't pay her any attention. Sansa thought she saw pity in the Queen's eyes as Cersei stood up to smoothen her dress. I shall be going now. I want to know how Stannis can accept that old man. Find out. Cersei tilted her head, annoyed by the harsh tone, but did not say a word. She hurried off to the door and shut it behind her with a soft click. The moment his mother was out of the chamber, Joffrey snatched his crossbow. He had never held the weapon when he was with her. Sansa felt a little daunted but kept her face calm. He aimed the ornate crossbow at her. You never told me what you think of it, he said, unamused. The bow, your grace, she asked softly. Margaery likes it. She wanted me to teach her how to use it. I've never practiced using a living target, though. Sansa fought the instinct to turn and run away. You can always go to Kingswood, my prince. I believe there are plenty of games there. Most of it. King Robert's favorite game. Joffrey sneered, I hate it when you speak to me. Your face, he strode to her and Sansa fought the desire to throw up the bile in her stomach. Reminds me of your ugly wolf. The one who mauled me, that beast. How I wonder why my father agreed to marry me to such plebeian origins as you. At his mocking of her family, she found courage in her anger. I am Sansa Stark, eldest daughter of the Warden of the North, traitor's daughter, Joffrey scoffed. And Hand of the King. The blood of the first men runs in my vein, and I am as noble as you. Your father was a traitor, a disgrace to my father's reign. Joffrey tried to grab her with his free hand, but Sansa recoiled from him. Don't touch me, she unexpectedly hissed. I am your king, I can do whatever I want with you, more so when you're married to me. Does a true king have to keep saying that he is king? Say that one more time, I'll make sure you will never speak again. Have you not learned your lesson? Is there a brain in your head? Should I tear that apart and take a look? The crossbow in his hand swung dangerously, an arrow readied inside the latch. Joffrey's index finger right on the trigger. Forgive me, your grace. You stupid bitch. If you dare giving me stupid daughters, I will kill you both. She yelped as the crossbow fired. The arrow narrowly missed her head and stuck into the mound behind her. Joffrey put another arrow on the barrel, cocking it with skilled hands. He pulled the string back evenly and took aim. Please, she begged, only to fall on deaf ears. The hound still standing silently, his face growing red. Osmond Kettleback laughed and moved farther from her. Sir Osmond, give a lesson for my betrothed. Not the mouth, even when I want to crush all those teeth, but I need her to be pretty. She closed her eyes and imagined she was somewhere else, away from here. The first blow hit her, and even when she shut her eyes she still saw stars as she was cast down to her knees, taken by the harshness. The bruises in her thighs throbbing like an open wound. She struggled to stay upright, kneeling on the stone floor, trembling with each blow. Not a sound escaped her mouth. She will not give Joffrey the satisfaction. Sir Osmond's gauntlet hand struck her in the rib, sending her rolling on the floor. In her pain and humiliation she tried to remember what made those Kettlebacks earn their knighthood, but none come to her memory. It was a lie, the songs and the stories were all lies. The men who stripped her naked and hit her were all knights. The man who took the most joy of seeing her pain was a prince, now a king. Lies, all lies. Sansa closed her eyes as another blow hit her lower parts of the body. She felt a stabbing pain in her calf. Even when she was lying on the floor curled like a baby, trying in vain to protect her head, it did not stop both men from hurting her. Yesterday I asked Grand Maester Pycelle how long it takes to break someone's neck, Joffrey said, smirking under his golden crown. He was clearly enjoying every blow. It didn't take long for a rabbit, or Tommen's kittens, so, I just wonder. Osmond's fingers enveloped her neck, squeezing. She tried to speak but no sound came out. Her lungs felt like on fire and she started to claw at Osmond's hands. She didn't want to cry, but tears welled up in her eyes. Perhaps she will die before Robb does come. They are all monsters, Sansa thought, looking at Joffrey. The sun shone through the iron bars and fell onto his golden head, to his crown. The ruby embedded in the crown glaring red. Monsters do live in a castle, after all, they are king and knights. Wait, Joffrey was breathing hard. I will do it. She gulped the air greedily as Osmond's fingers pried loose from her neck. It was not long before they were replaced by Joffrey's, and the air was cut from her lungs again. Let me go, she wanted to say, but instead of words she could only make an incoherent gurgling sound. The squeeze stopped blood supply to her brain, the air stopped going to her lungs. She started to black out. Enough. Sansa blinked, trying to drive away darkness that was growing in her eyes. Air slipped into her lungs one more time, sending her gulping and retching as if she needed to spit out something. Her face was wet with tears. What did you say, dog? Joffrey snatched the crossbow again. You will kill the girl, said the hound calmly. Your mother won't be happy if you kill her. I believe your grandfather and the imp would be, too. I am king. Said the hound, without the slightest of fear. Before his grace takes her in front of men and the gods, the girl is under protection of her family, who is wedging war to yours. And she is under protection of the Queen Regent, as her foster parent. Joffrey screeched angrily, stomping his feet. Sansa found herself shaking. Leave. Her eyes rested on the hound, the burned, scarred part of his face was facing her, but he did not return her gaze. His eyes fixed on Joffrey. The ugly, not Acer had saved her once again. Sansa. Hello, Tommen she smiled at the boy, who is the mirror half of his brother, minus the cruelty in his green eyes. He was tall enough for an 11-year-old boy. He grew his golden hair rather long and styled it just like Joffrey. In one quick glance, Tommen really resembled his older brother, though he still supported baby fats that made him appear plump. I'd curtsy to you, but my legs are not in their best shapes. She cleared her throat, feeling a sharp, thick pain as she spoke. Did he hurt you again? The innocence in his asking made her heart clenched. Tommen was afraid of Joffrey and never wanted to be in the same room with his brother unless his mother was present. I slipped on the stairs and sprained my ankle. The best thing she could do was not making the young prince worried. A seemingly newborn kitten peeked out from Tommen's robe. The fur was light grey, and it reminded her of Lady, her direwolf, its bones waiting for her in Winterfell. Are you going to Tumbleton with me? Asked Tommen in a hushed tone, looking to his left and right. Tumbleton? No, I don't think so. Why? I heard they are sending me to Tumbleton. He looked upset. Am I going to die? What, why are you saying that? They sent Myrcella to Dorne, but she never reached Dorne. Mother said your brother abducted her. That he might kill Myrcella should the war is lost to us. It was a lie, Tommen. My brother would never do such thing. Well, my brother would. Tommen shuddered when he said it. Joff said your brother is a traitor. Sansa gritted her teeth. Traitors are not murderers. What if I never reach Tumbleton, just like Myrcella never reached Dorne? She took Tommen's hand in hers, squeezing it gently. The boy looked up to her, pleading with his eyes. He was scared. Everyone in this city was scared. If she peeked inside her heart, she knew she was afraid, too. Yet she clung stubbornly to the hope that Robb will come. I believe they send you to Tumbleton for your own safety, Tommen. She tried to calm the boy, even when her heart was burning with rage towards Joffrey. There's no way they let you go from behind these walls, if they weren't sure you'd arrive safely. Not after they lost Myrcella. I want to fight, too, he pouted. But only Soloras wants to train me. Her brother Brandon used to hope to become a knight, too, fighting for Robb and the North. That was before he lost his legs. You will, when you're taller to fit inside an armor. But I am almost as tall as Joff. The childish side of Tommen gets the best hold of him. Mother made him this gorgeous armor and she sent me away to Tumbleton. It is not fair. Do you think Mother considers me weak? That's why she always favor Joffrey. Of course not. Sansa shook her head patiently. You're brave and kind-hearted. Someday you will be a gallant knight just like Arthur Dayne, or Aemon the Dragon Knight. Bravery has many faces, you know. Like, still going to Tumbleton despite you have concerns of what may lay ahead. Tommen finally smiles. I guess you're right. There you are. A servant ran towards them and took the young prince by his arm. Don't go out of my sight again, Prince Tommen. This is a dangerous place, your mother said so. Tommen sighed. My mother said everything is dangerous. I guess I've to go now, Sansa. Thank you. I hope your brother is kind to my sister, he added softly. Joffrey and Mother said awful things about him, but I've met him in Winterfell. I don't think he's evil. He doesn't look like one. Because he is not, Sansa said to herself as she watched Tommen went with the servant. Long, she pondered Tommen's revelation about Tumbleton. Perhaps they think to smuggle Tommen out of the city, which would be a bold move considering Stannis' host is near. How would they do it? She understood enough. Should Joffrey fall in battle to come, the Iron Throne's claim would be fallen on Tommen's young shoulders. Will Stannis be merciful? Will Robb? Two golden cloaks glanced at her and whispered to each other, laughing as she passed. Massive curtain walls surrounded the castle with stone parapets. The grim masonry was her prison. She slowly walked towards the end of the outer edge of the wall's ramparts, just across the Great Hall, to the most secluded part where the heads of traitors are traditionally placed on iron spikes at the gatehouse. The heads were looking back at her, staring with their empty sockets, void of eyeballs. They did not scare her anymore. No one paid her any attention as she stood there silently, looking up to the severed, rotting heads. In her mind, one of those heads was Joffrey's. His pouting mouth would be gaping towards the sky, a crow pecked at his eyes. When his flesh begins to rot and maggots and crows feast on him, What lies beneath is the real Joffrey. She had begged for mercy, and his mercy was death for her father. She wondered what kind of mercy Stannis and Robb would give Joffrey, that is if they ever would. The weather shifted just as Sansa retreated to her chamber. Cool breeze sipping through her heavy crimson velvet, poking at her aching bones. There was ringing in her ears, and her throat itched where Joffrey and Osmond strangled her. She coughed, painfully. Perhaps she could rest for an hour or two before she relishes her nightmare again, being in the Red Keep. Her scalp itched by the intricate hairdo, she longed to take off 1 or 2 pins. Despite the pain she found herself humming along the empty hallway, something she had not done in a long time. The sound that came out of her throat sounded like not hers, it was thick and raspy, reminding her of the hounds. The sky was darkening even though it was still daytime. She wondered when the last time it was raining. Faintly, she heard men's voices line up in the yard. 3 servant boys crossing hastily carrying long chains. It will be used to lock Maegor's Holdfast when fighting knocks on the Red Keep's wall. A male servant scurrying off with a cask of wine. Aside from the increasing duties of the royal household, in addition to the stress caused by Stannis, life in the Red Keep just went on as usual. Stannis and my brother Robb should not be merciful if they wanted to defend their thrones, she thought as she made the climb to her chamber. The serpentine steps in Maegor's Holdfast can be strenuous to climb, especially with a limp. And just like King Robert erased every Targaryen alive when he took the Iron Throne, that should be what Stannis will have to do. In the distance, a bell was pealing loudly from the middle of the city. It was only rung to announce royal birth, death, and war. It echoed grimly, carried by the wind, a melody of warning and death. Sansa did not stop even when her legs threatened to give up. Let them come, she prayed. Let Robb come. Chapter 18. Chapter text. Brienne. The comforting steel hugged her frame tightly as a squire helped her with the cobalt blue armor. Pauldron, breastplate, placard and finally her cuisses were strapped to its righteous places. The long sword hanging from her belt clanged softly against the armor. She was ready. A horn was blown and banners raised. At first light they marched to Sarsfield, the last holdfast between them and Casterly Rock. The young wolf looked dashingly gallant in his armor, so much of a king with the morning light bouncing off his spiky iron crown. He had inspired many people, bringing vengeance and the dream of independence. After she lost Renly to Lannister's assassin, a shame she'd forever hold in her heart for failing Renly, Brian agreed to follow Lady Catelyn and pledge her sword to Renly's brother and the last Baratheon in the realm, Stannis. When he put her into Robb Stark's force, at first she was a little annoyed. Especially when she found out Robb did not go with Stannis to King's Landing. Strategically speaking, she knew they were better off dividing the troops with the Iron Throne claimant come first to the capital. If she follows her grudges, she is more than eager to wrap her fingers around Joffrey's neck or slit the imp's throat the way Renly was murdered. Yet she keeps her silence, never voicing her feelings. In Renly, and now in Robb's forces Brian doesn't talk much unless needed, the lords and the knights don't really talk to her, either. She knew they looked at her differently, a woman out of her place. Brian had long been used to it, the looks and the sneers. A few northerners understood the path she had chosen since they were accustomed to a harder lifestyle, like the Mormonts, which is currently led by a woman. Or the Umbers, who value strength and loyalty above all else. Sometimes she thought she'd fare better if she was born in the north. If she wasn't training or attending Robb's councils, Brian chose to be alone in her pavilion, away from the sneering men. Not that she lamented her misfortune, but simply to curb herself from challenging those petty Southron men, that would mostly resulted in humiliating them. Robb Stark doesn't need more wounded men, does he? The only person she spent time with if she wasn't training or by King Robb's side was, oddly, the Princess Myrcella. Initially she was asked to help look after the princess, something she did not like, but a command was a command nonetheless. They don't share much in common other than being born as women. In fact, the little princess made her feel a bit intimidated. Myrcella Baratheon, or Lannister, she had to remind herself, is the very image she craved growing up, courteous, beautiful, and proficient in all feminine skills as a lady should be. How she used to pray to the Seven to make her just like that. Obviously, the Seven didn't answer her prayers. Taller than any men, save for the great Jon Umber, Brian is muscular enough thanks to her training in wielding swords since childhood. Her straw-colored hair always cut short near the scalp. Her nose has been broken more than once, and in her full-bodied armor everyone mistaken her as a man. Brian the Beauty, men called her. The Maid of Tarth, friends and foe called her. The only child the gods let her father keep, the freakish one not fit to be a son or daughter. Brian grew up and chose the only way she knew and was thankfully fond of, being a knight, despite the Seven Kingdom never seen a female knight. Though she knows it is frowned upon, yet she never wavered. Her father had been generous enough to let her train under their master-at-arms, even hiring more trainers from Braavos and Meereen. 3 years after she wields a sword for the first time, no one dared to mock her openly. When girls her age bled and shipped to wed, she donned her armor and fought for her father. When girls her age bare heirs and children for their husband, she came to Renly's aid when the latter called his bannerman. The Lord of Storm's End, one of the 3 claimants of the Iron Throne in the War of the Five Kings, needed her. And she had come to him, fighting for a place in his Rainbow Kingsguard. She joined Renly out of her love for the jovial, high-spirited man, the only man who treated her with kind and respect when she was a mere child dreaming of a man's affection. Renly saved her from humiliation when no boy wanted to talk to her. Brian remembered fondly when he danced with her in her father's hall, a long time ago, and as he spun her around on that awful dress her Septa made her to wear, Renly made her feel like she was as beautiful as any girl in the realm. The second time Renly was in her arms was when she held his cold and lifeless body. She remained on the side of his deathbed, keeping vigil, even long after Lord Tyrell withdrew his troops and took Lady Margaery to King's Landing. She held Renly's cold hand when his army bled and disappeared. She was lost, desperate, and angry when Lady Catelyn found what was left of Renly's army in Bitterbridge. When Robb told her to keep company with the princess, Brian had to refrain herself from lashing out at the command. She was not in his army to babysit a hostage, even when she is a princess. She had come with the promise of putting a true Baratheon on the Iron Throne, and to run her sword through whomever responsible of Renly's murder. However, soon the resentment vanished as the princess took Brian's hand, holding it under her more delicate ones. There were tears in the girl's eyes. "Uncle Renly has always been kind to me. It feels just like yesterday he came to my room with plums and freshly harvested strawberries from the reach. I've heard you were in his Rainbow Kingsguard, Lady Brian. I am truly sorry for your loss. He was a kind man." She was too taken aback, surprised to hear the sincere condolences, and at the mention of Renly's name for the first time since Bitterbridge, that she could only muster a weak whine. "He was. I failed him when he was murdered. I was not even with him. It was her greatest regret. I only held him when they found him lying on the ground, already gone to the gods." They both mourned for the fallen king, her and the princess. The young wolf reminded her so much of Renly, kind, chivalrous, born to be king. No wonder she caught how the princess looked at him. As they dined together, the princess would ask about the battlefield, about Brian's training in weaponry, and of her home in Tarth. Begrudgingly she could not hate the Lannister girl, however she wanted to. It did not take long for them to talk like good friends, although the topic of Renly's death made her still unable to regulate herself well enough. She did not tell Myrcella who was Renly's murderer, only saying Renly was killed in the war. Of course, she was not entirely lying. The wind was blowing hard that morning when they left for Sussfield. The air was cold to breathe in, and she looked up to sniff the last of the summer's scent. She was already on her horse, ready at Robb's side along with Patrek Mallister, the heir of Seaguard in the Riverlands, when the young wolf made a detour to the Princess Pavilion. Yes, Brian had seen the way the princess laid eyes on Robb, and how the young wolf looked at her. Brian always had a deep capacity for loyalty and adoration, and she had craved for love, though at 35 name-a-days she had been unlucky in that area. Not that she minded, though. Brian only wanted to fight and die for Renly if she had to. Now that Renly has gone, she lives only to avenge him. But she realized she wanted to be seen the way Robb looked at Myrcella. How his gaze would adhere a few seconds longer than it should, as if he does not want to look away. She was not the only one who was aware of it, looking at their inaudible exchange. The waking Robb bent over his horse to slip something into the princess' hand. Sir Patrek had shifted uncomfortably atop his grey horse. Darin Hornwood looked away, troubled. They marched through the green hills of Westerlands, stopped only a night to discuss their strategy one last time. Scouts had come back with news of a vacant-looking castle. They had left with Grey Wind earlier, and along the route succeeded in taking out at least a dozen of Lannister's scouts. "They are expecting us," Lord Umber warned. "They know we're marching to Casterly Rock. Sarsfield is the last holdfast between us and the rock." "This could be a trap," Lord Bolton said softly. "Perhaps we need to wait until ravens come back from the Vale." "No," Robb argued, "we cannot wait any longer. Tywin Lannister could have sneaked to the capital. We must quickly reach Casterly Rock. The old lion has not shown his teeth, I wonder why, and we better find out quickly. We should use the princess, bring her in front of Tywin's castle and tell the old lion we'll hang her if he doesn't yield. We will not use the princess for such a low act." Robb raised his voice. "Threats are threats, my lord. Which we must do if Tywin decided to challenge us back. We need to regroup with Stannis." Robin Flint, heir of Widow's Watch located at the end of a peninsula between the Shivering Sea and the Bight, spoke up. "If I may ask, Your Grace, what are your plans with our captive?" "Which one?" Robb asked back, his eyes were fixed on the map in front of him. They did not hold many captives. Brian saw how some lords exchanged looks between them. "The one you keep in the camp," said Robin Flint. "She keeps my sister alive." Something that was left unsaid hung thickly in the air. The tent door parted to reveal a man behind it, his breath hitched from riding. "Yes?" Blackfish asked. "We found them. 5,000, at least the last scout to arrive said. Banners. Gold coins in checkered purple, green arrows, purple stars, brindled boar, and the golden lion, my lord." "That is all." "That is all, my lord, Thank you," Robb chimed in. After the departure of the scout, Robb looked thoughtfully at the map. "I thought there'd be more men in front of us," he muttered. "Where are the rest of Tywin's men?" "He must be up to something," one of his lieutenants said. Tywin Lannister is not the type of person to let us take his gold, nor suffer defeat after defeat. I saw the ruins when I was in Castellaria, left as it is after Tywin extinguished the Rains and the Tarbecks, root and branch, when he was still half a boy. The singers even made a song of it. Gods! I hate that song. I'd say we better wait, Your Grace," Lord Bolton offered again. "The Vale could send their answer weeks from now, given if they want to reply at all." "What if they are not?" Robb said stubbornly, "and Stannis is about to fall upon King's Landing. He might have rid us of Joffrey and the Imp. He depends on us to keep Tywin and his army busy in the west." The Lord of Dreadfort looked displeased. "We'll still take Sarsfield. Uncle Brynden, you and I will lead the front with Lady Brian and Lord Umber. We'll take archers and footmen. Sir Donal, you'll lead the cavalry." Sir Donal Swan, the Stony Helm's heir, a handsome man of 20 with sandy brown hair, stood straighter at the mention of his name. "An honor I gladly accept, Your Grace," he bowed. "Get some rest, my lords, and my lady. We depart before the first light." She stayed awake long after the camping ground grew silent. She was not afraid of what awaits on the morrow. She was even prepared for it. There is no deeper desire than to cut down every Lannister man she met, even better if Robb immediately finishes off whatever makes him went to the Westerlands in the first place so they can regroup with Stannis in King's Landing. There awaits more golden lions for her to avenge Renly. Before the dusty purple and orange hues peaked in the horizon, Brian was ready on her horse. Darin Hornwood, Patrek Mallister, Small Jon Umber, and Owen Norrie, who acted as Robb's battle guard's companions, trotted with her. Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, joined them as they broke camp. Their group rode about 10 kilometers into Sarsfield, Robb surrounded by his Kingsguards. His direwolf, Grey Wind, led in the front of the line. The giant direwolf boosted the men's morale in battle, a menacing beast now as tall as a grown man. She had seen how the direwolf easily ripped men and tore horses in battles. It must have tasted human flesh, but somehow civil enough to them. Grey Wind growled. Its back curled full of threat against the enemy that their eyes had not seen. They have reached Sarsfield. At the far end she can see the top of its highest tower, so close yet so far. What do you see, Grey Wind? Robb whispered. His direwolf continued to snarl, more urgent the passing second, baring its teeth. Robb signaling for a halt. Not long after, a horn was heard from across the field. The thumping of thousands of foot soldiers could be heard, brought the wind. Their commanders, sitting on horseback, appeared in the distance, sigils flapping in the wind, Lannisters, Sarsfields, Paynes, Peckledons, Crickerhalls, just like the scout reported. They asked for a parley, the Blackfish pointing at a single horse rider riding out to them, holding a staff of white flags. What do you think they'd say? I don't know, but I've my suspicions. I better go on your behalf, your grace. Robb thought for a moment. I'll go, he said. I'll take Lady Brian with me. She did not expect Robb to invite her, but more surprised that he decided to handle the parley himself. As expected, Robb's statement provoked protest and opposition from his lieutenants who offered to replace him in the parley. No, I've decided I'll go. Robb was stern with his decision. Then take more companions and that direwolf of yours with you, Blackfish suggested, to which Robb relented. They urged their horses to the middle of the field to meet the Lannisters. A big man with broad shoulders and thick waist greeted them, fully clasped in crimson-red armor from his head to toe. His short blonde hair and green eyes were the first Trey Brian recognized. A roaring lion carved with gold embedded on his chest, giving away his station. He was accompanied by 4 lords and 2 knights. All of them were agitated the moment Robb's group approached with Grey Wind in tow. There was a bit of fanfare as the horses smelled the direwolf. They neighed in terror, standing and kicking on their hind legs. A man fell off his horse. Kevan Lannister, the Blackfish, acknowledged the man curtly. Blackfish, he chimed back before slightly nodding to Robb. And the king in the north himself. Robb grounds his jaw. My lord, he greeted. We don't have all day. Indeed we don't, Kevan Lannister nodded. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously at Grey Wind, who encircled them menacingly. The Queen Regent and the Hand have asked you to leave our land and return our daughter that you took. I see you've done neither, despite our good faith in returning your father's bones and his Valyrian sword. And where is my nephew? Give me back my sisters, the North's independence from the Iron Throne and the remains of Northerners you killed in King's Landing, then we'll talk. Robb shot back. Your sister is still betrothed to Joffrey. You certainly understand it is not easy to break a legal betrothal, don't you? I spat on their betrothal, said Robb. We consider Joffrey broke it when he killed my father. Please don't make it harder for us. Either way, you and Stannis are no match against our forces. It is only about time you'll lose. While you're not with Stannis, do think carefully. This is our last offer. Return the princess and my nephew. Leave our land, go back to your home and never talk about independence again. The crown will forget this rebellion ever happened. If you are so sure that you'll defeat us, why haven't Tywin shown his teeth after we destroyed his army at the Green Fork? Listen, boy, we offered you a chance of peace and to spare your men's lives, We will not bow to tyrants again. Robb snapped. Not after they killed 2 of the last Warden of the North. Keep your peace. Keep your useless parleys. Did you not see the Lannisters dead I littered in your land? We're done here. Without even waiting for his lieutenants, Robb turned the reins and rode away. Grey Wind followed him. Brian saw how Kevan Lannister's face turns purple with anger. Proud and arrogant, a deathly mixture for a king, Kevan hummed, chewing the inside of his cheek in displeasure. Can't really blame him, can you? Blackfish told him dryly. 2 wardens of the North were indeed killed in King's Landing without proper trial. We had hoped to reach peace today, Blackfish. Advise the Wolf Pup and his men to return north and Riverlands after pledging their fealty to the Iron Throne. Tell the Stormlands to kneel before their true Baratheon. And then, what? After we've knelt and pledged our fealty, so that Little King on the Iron Throne could cut our heads, the way he did to Eddard Stark on the steps of Baelor. The Stormlanders are already behind the true Baratheon. We've Dawn in our back. They didn't take kindly the fact that the pup held their prince's betrothed as a hostage. We have the Vale, too, as a matter of fact. The Wolf Pup will regret his decision if he proceed with his plan. Brian glanced to Blackfish. He didn't even flinch at the threat. Or perhaps you'll be. They lined up along the field, the green grass spread before them, as far as the eye could see. Robb was talking with Blackfish and Lord Umber, she could hear his angry murmur. They will ride to battle, she knew it. Their enemy was on the opposite of the field, the cavalry in the vanguard. If they ask her, she wholeheartedly agrees not to trust the Lannisters and their parleys. Her horse neighing softly as she saw Robb turn the reins and start racing his black stallion along the front row of his men. The wolf fur sewn on his surcoat waved in the wind, the iron spikes on his crown reflecting the sunlight. "North," he shouted. He has the kind of voice that someone would listen to all day, vibrating deep with power and contagious confidence. "North. Stormlands. Riverlands." His men stomped their boots on the hard ground, those wielding swords banging the flat side of their blades against the shields. "We've seen their banners approaching, their horns calling. Soon they'll come upon us. Shall we allow them to violate your freedom? Shall we let them terrorize our families, our homeland? Will you bravely raise your swords and fight them? Oh, we might die, and die we shall. But for what we lay our lives, is what makes us different from those tyrants in front of us. I'm honed to live and fight with you. For independence and the rightful heir of the Iron Throne." "The king in the north," his men shouted. "The king in the north. The king in the north. Stannis, the rightful heir of the Iron Throne," the Stormlanders shouted. "Stannis." Brian saw the enemy sent out their cavalry to crush them, spears and swords drawn. The Golden Lions and its followers fluttered with threats. Robb turned to Blackfish. "Sound the warning call. Arrows, on my mark. Archers." Brynden Tully roared. A squire blew the signal, making the men parted to make way for their archers. They lined up more than 100 meters in 3 lines. Arrows were pulled from quivers, slipped on the nock. She could feel the roar of dust from their horses' hooves as they charged to them. "Hold!" Robb shouted. "They are getting closer," the riders screaming their battle cries. For Casterly Rock, she heard them. For Sarsfield. Usurpers. Traitors. The cavalry would be on them in a few seconds. Brian felt the man beside her inhaled sharply, her own palms sweating under the gauntlets. She gripped her sword tighter. It was terrifying to watch the form, charging forwards with such ferocity. No matter how many times she saw the horseman approaching, she always feels the bowels loosening in sick anticipation. Every instinct told her to run, but the soldier in her, the stronger one, bracing for impact. "My king," a great Jon Umber warned, he unsheathed the biggest and ugliest longsword Brian ever seen. His son, Smalljon, did the same. "They are almost upon us. Hold." As if in slow motion she saw how the horses before them neighed dangerously, the riders brandishing their swords ready to cut them down. She made a quick calculation in her mind, holding her sword with both hands. The ground beneath her trembling as 100 horses and its riders charged straight at them. Their battlefield was a vast savanna surrounded by hills, the way a Westerland's terrain should be. The woods were behind their backs. Under certain circumstances, Robb had instructed them to retreat into the woods and lure the enemy into traps waiting in the woods. Archers, now. Behind her, the swishing sound of 1,000 arrows was released from their strings. A split second later the sky above their heads was covered in shadows of so many arrows. They rained over the riders and one by one fell to the ground and didn't move again. "Reload!" Blackfish shouted. More arrows rained over the remaining riders, but didn't entirely finish them off. Some of the riders covered their heads with shields. "Send in the cavalry," said Robb. "Riders!" Sir Donal bellowed. The sound of thousands of swords drawn from its sheaths gave Brian a familiar sensation. For Renly, Brian thought as her horse raced to meet the enemy. She was ready to kill. She needs to kill. Their cavalry advanced towards the enemy, crushing bones and steel. When finally the enemy's sword meets the tip of her sword, she no longer thinks of anything else. She sat on her war horse, taking down as many enemies as possible. Adrenaline sent her heart racing deliciously. Their iron helmets protected the heads, but Brian eyed the gap between the helmet and their necks. That is the place Brian draws her sword into. Blood hit her face from one of the enemy's neck as she cut him down. It blinded her for a second, for she did not wear a helmet, From where she stood Brian heard screams of the dying and the sound of lords shouting orders. Banners waved in the wind. Kevan Lannister and his lieutenants sat quietly on their horses, overlooking the battlefield from atop of a hill. An instinct came to her unbidden, that something felt not right. Brian looked around the battlefield, seeing bodies spangled on the ground. Blackfish came to her side. Both maintained their positions while counting some of those who were still standing. "They are coming again. Hold the line!" Blackfish shouted. "Hold the line!" The second wave of cavalry hit them again. Their horn was blown to signal incoming arrows, which were released from behind them. Brian raised her left hand, the hand that wielded her shield. Some of the enemy managed to penetrate their defense. One of the riders, a big knight with a scar extending from his left eyebrow to his chin, waved his sword at Brian and the Blackfish. "Blackfish," his voice boomed through the battlefield. "You knew him?" Brian asked. "Oh," Blackfish said, "Salal Crickehall, second son of old Lord Roland Crickehall. I put that ugly scar on his face years ago. Come to me, old man, and have a taste of my sword." Blackfish sighed. "If you will excuse me, Lady Brian." "You're a woman," Salal spat. "I don't understand this king in the north. He refused to return my liege's granddaughter, and there's a woman fighting in his army. Enough. Let our steel speak. Let's stop talking. Besides, before the day is over we will get the princess back." He let out a semi-grunting laugh, reminding Brian of a pig. There was a big gap between Salal Crickehall's front teeth as he grinned. That chilling instinct came to her again, this time it was harder, more demanding, and made her a little scared. Something is terribly wrong. Robb and his companions were fighting at the far end of the line. Blackfish started his duel with Salal, their war horses circling each other as its riders ringing their steel. She started to make her way to Robb, cutting down more enemies blocking her way. In the distance, Lannister's infantry began charging towards them. Swords, strokes of arrows and spears clamoring around her. Her body moved as if she was dancing. The difference was, she danced with the stranger. A dance of life and death. And the Lannisters are so wealthy that they are able to arm their men with the best iron, equipped with armors from head to toe. One by one she saw her comrades fell, until she was among the last one standing. From the corner of her eyes she spotted the young wolf charging boldly atop his horse, slashing left and right. Soon, she saw the opponent's line begin to thin out. A blasting horn was heard, this time coming from the opposite of the hill. Their enemies were moving backwards. "They broke," a man shouted happily, "My lord, they broke. They retreated." It's true, their enemies were pulling back. Why? Think. She racked her mind for any possibilities she had not seen. She could feel it in the air, the chilling instinct of a soldier. The enemy resorted to feigning a flight and appeared to flee. She saw how their troops began to advance in pursuit of the enemy. "No. Don't break ranks," she shouted. A few hundred meters from the battlefield, Kevan Lannister turned and rode away. A man blocked her horse, the sword held high to send the killing blow. Brian ducked in time, her sword hand instinctively rose to thrust her sword into the man's unprotected head. Not far from her, Owen Nuri cut down a man in red armor. "Do you think what I think?" he called to her. "They shouldn't pull back as easily as this," she said, panting. "Hold your ground. Don't break ranks." Some men who heard them immediately stopped chasing the enemy and stayed put in guard position. They had expected at least 20,000 awaiting them in Sussfield, as it is the last hold-fast before they reach Casterly Rock. Yet they only faced, what, the scout said 5,000. Not even close. Where are the rest of the men? Brian took a look around the battlefield. Corpses lay on the ground, red and gold, purple and white, their armors covered in blood. Have they gone to King's Landing already, abandoning the Westerlands? Or? She trotted along their perimeter taking in the whole scene in front of her, of how the opponents break ranks. Or the enemy used Robb's tactic in defeating Jaime Lannister's forces in the Whispering Woods. Brian had heard about the ploy and its success. A brilliant one, however grim. The realization made her gasp, pulling the reins of her horse to sudden halt. She didn't know whether her hunch was right or not, but Robb had to know. In the hubbub around her, she had lost sight of Rob. Her sword was covered in blood and she was sweating under her armor. "Your Grace," she shouted frantically, but it drowned under the frenzied sound of the battlefield, of groaning dying men. She urged her horse to a gallop, trampling every footman standing in her way to find Rob. Brian found him way up in the front. "Your Grace, the camp." Rob Stark caught her eyes. "The camp," she shouted again, "this is a diversion. They will attack from the rear, from the camp." She saw how the blood drained from his face. "We need every rider to go to the camp." She prayed she was not wrong. If she was, she will cause Rob a massive loss today. "Sir Donal, withdraw your riders." Rob trusted her instinct. "Your Grace." Sir Donal's face was aghast, his helmet long gone. Blood was dripping from the cut on his forehead. "Bring every rider to the camp, that's where Tywin's army is," Brian said impatiently. Sir Donal turned to his squire, who blew the horn to signal retreat for the riders. Brian saw their cavalry begin to leave the battlefield and retreat into the woods. "With me!" Rob yelled. "Lord Umber, Lord Bolton, you have the vanguard." Rob and his companions fell in beside her. "Your Grace, it is a day ride to the camp." "Then we must hurry." Another horn to signal retreat. "The camp. Back to the camp." She was halfway when she heard Lord Bolton ordered the men to prepare their spears. She looked back, only to see the enemy had sent mounted men to see Rob's going into the woods. Rob's black destrier was not far from Brian's, his young face pale as a mare's milk. For the first time, she sensed his fear and his doubt. Rob's companions ride between them. They left behind the battlefield, but Brian could still hear the cries. Some of the horsemen chased them into the woods. Grey Wind hurtled at them, claws and teeth, killing horses and its riders. All of a sudden, an arrow blasted near her head, nearly hitting her. From memory she recalled Sarsfield was renowned for their mounted archers. And isn't their sigil an arrow blasting over a green field? In several councils, Brian had heard complaints from some of Rob's lieutenants. They argued how Rob always positioned himself in the thickest part of the battle. One lucky arrow, or one stab right in his head or his heart, and they will lose their first king in 300 years after Torrhen Stark, a risk they dare not take. Even the princess had her own complaint about the young wolf. Why can't he use full plate armor, if he wanted to be in the front lines? Brian knew why. Rob just simply never trained with full plate armor like his southern counterparts. The Northerners, for starters, never use full steel armor due to cold weather. They seemed to prefer boiled leathers and chain mails, paired with gorgets to protect their neck, gauntlets to cover the arms and hands, and pauldrons. Sometimes they'd wear helmets, but not Rob. Indeed, Brian saw the enemy aiming for Rob, who put himself at the forefront, even though he was surrounded by his companions and Direwolf. One more king is taken down, this war might end sooner. A sword swung down, aiming for Rob's unprotected head, only at the last second his sword hand rising to block the sharpened edge. "Protect the king." For the north. Two archers on horseback coming at her. Brian braced for impact, but a swift shadow of grey snatched one of the riders before he could aim. His scream distracted the other, and Brian's sword separated his head from the body. "It's the wolf," one of the enemy shouted. Their horses were not familiar with the beast, and Grey Wind's scent sent the horses into frenzy. The archers couldn't aim above an anxious mount, and they were easily taken down either by swords or Grey Wind. Rob had instructed their smiths to make caltrops, a made-up weapon of sharp nails arranged in such a manner that one of them always points upward from a stable base. They had scattered enough of it on the forest floor, carving signs on the tree trunk for their own safe passage if they had to retreat into the woods. The caltrops are meant to slow down and injure the enemy's horses. Brian saw the marked tree and swiftly directed her horse to run on the paths that were marked safe. Behind her, the screams of men as their horses stepped on the caltrops rang out, accompanied by a thud as their horses fell to the ground. The number of enemies was not as many as they thought, but the fact Rob had to divide their men in the middle of the battle made it easy for the enemy to break down their defensive line. Their camp, which holds Rob's supply line and hostage, or Sarsfield. Not an easy choice for every commander to choose in a split second, and Rob did not make it look easy either. Their battle was a chaos. She could not imagine how Lord Umber and Lord Bolton defended the front line with only footmen. Some of their horsemen had already rode to the camp, but more had fallen by arrows. If they were continually being chased and attacked by the enemy, they would not reach the campsite in time. In fact, most likely the enemy was already there. Rob realized this too. Grey Wind, find her. The direwolf tore a limb from its latest victim and disappeared into the woods. She knew the beast was as fast as its namesake, but she never really saw how quick it could outrun their horses. Her eyes met Rob's when Brian tried to aid him. Take the riders and go. Rob shouted. Darren Hornwood took a blow and Brian could hear his agonizing scream echoed in the woods as she turned her horse around. Riders, she shouted. With me. She raced her horse as fast as possible, hoping desperately she wasn't too late. The direwolf has long gone ahead of her. Brian looked back and to her relief, no one followed her. If her instincts were right and the enemy truly attacked their camp, then they let Sarsfield be taken by Rob in an attempt to devastate his forces by taking his precious hostage and destroying his supply. If they succeeded, Rob would be trapped between enemies. He will be in a weakened position. Brian and the rest of the cavalry urged their horses as fast as possible, slamming the hooves onto the hard ground, crackling on falling dry leaves. Not once they dared to slow down, out of fear of what awaited them in the camp. Rob brought most of his men to Sarsfield, leaving only 100 to garrison the camp. It won't be enough, who knows how many men Tywine sent to crush Rob's camp. Brian knew Rob has set sentries, but 100 men won't be sufficient to fight against a battalion of mounted men. The wind slapped on her face. She was afraid. They had hastily divided their own forces, with her bringing only the riders since it would be faster for mounted men to reach the camp. Is this it? Are they going to lose this war? Brian felt the heat flushing through her body, even when the wind was cold. The last time she turned to see her comrades, Rob was surrounded by enemies. Her gauntlet hands trembled slightly on the reins, but she gritted her teeth to shake every bit of fear. Anger fueled her. She spurred her destrier faster, mercilessly. Chapter 19. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Myrcella. Something was in the air. An odd, unexplainable dread that something would happen. She sat enjoying the warm sunshine in front of her pavilion, and when she looked around the camp she couldn't really shake the heavy feelings away, though it was a fine afternoon. The weather was not too cold and not too hot. To be short, she thought it was a perfect day. She could sit only wearing her cotton gown, her hair left loose to the waist. Now when she looked at her reflection she almost did not recognize the girl that stared back to her. She looked so ordinary, that she was sure if she walked past her mother on the street Circe would have thought she was merely a peasant. But the plain-looking girl that stares back at her from the mirror was smiling. She was stripped of her jewels, of her velvet and damasks, her hands began to feel dry and soil often entered into her shoes. The shoes were slippery too, unlike the one she had back then in King's Landing. And yet she was smiling. None of it matters anymore. Some men with spears were walking in front of her pavilion. They stopped for a moment to talk to Walton. In the end, Pia had won their arguments. Walton didn't ask Rob to march with his army, but rather stayed with them in the camp. Rob has gone for 3 days. In his absence, as usual, she spotted more men patrolling the perimeter. At night there would be more guards to stand in front of her pavilion. Most of them were Stark men, for Rob did not trust people outside the men he has known himself since childhood. The camp was quieter every time Rob went. Most of the campers were healers, squires waiting for their knights to return, and servants brought by the lords. Though she enjoyed the quietness, but not the lack of Rob. She kept his letter, and the buttercup flower, underneath her pillow. At night she took out the letter and read it over and over. Her finger tracing the black ink seeping in the parchment. If she held it close to her face, she thought she could smell him on it. She dreamt of him last night. She had hoped to see his face, but he was standing with his back to her. The wolf fur sewn on his surcoat waved under the moonlight. They were in that prairie again. Don't go, she remembered saying to him. Come back to me. Pia sat next to her, repairing Walton's sleeve, and the woman looked up when Pia realized Myrcella had stopped sewing. Milady. Pia whispered. It's all right. He will come back. Who? Myrcella turned to her friend, confused. King Rob, Pia answered, smiling, isn't he the one you're thinking about? Oh. Myrcella picking at her needle and the cloth at her lap again, embarrassed to meet Pia's eyes. He always comes back, Pia assured her. I am not thinking about him. Myrcella hushed her friend. Why would I? Gods, she hoped Pia did not recognize how her cheeks instantly flushed the moment Rob's name brought up. It's going to rain, Walton said, looking up to the blue, cloudless sky. How do you know? Asked Pia, curious. Can't you smell it? Both girls shook their heads. There, Walton insisted, sniffing the air, the smell of approaching downpour. I don't smell anything other than your sweat, Pia protested. Myrcella laughed, followed by Pia, who just realized her own joke. Walton rolled his eyes and put down the whetstone he used to hone the sword in his lap. Fine, he grumbled, stretch your arm like this. Go on, try, he encouraged them to follow his example. Can you feel it now? The drop in air pressure. Can you feel how heavy it is? Now look up and listen. Bet you won't find any birds flying above your pretty heads. Well, yes, Pia was unsure. Usually there's a lot of singing around the woods. A drop in the air pressure makes birds difficult to fly. Feel the way the wind blows. And look, spiders come down from their webs before the rain, every time. But the weather is so nice. Trust me, it will rain tonight. How did you know all those? Myrcella was intrigued. I grew up outdoors, girl. Slept under the sky when it was warm and dry enough, or in my father's field after a good harvest. Then when my parents died, my uncle who served as Winterfell's master-at-arms took me in. I was 10. I apprenticed as a gamekeeper before training in arms. There's a lot you can learn when you live mostly on your own in the open. You never told me, said Pia, her eyes teary. It must be hard. Now Walton shrugged. I've got good years, too. My uncle Roderick was kind, and so was Lord Stark. An idea came to Myrcella's mind. So you can make a fire. Walton looked at her like she grew another head. Every northerner can make a fire if they want to survive. Can you teach me, please? Walton rolled his eyes, opened his mouth, but Pia was faster. Of course he will. Won't you, Walton? Pia narrowed her eyes at him. At Pia's counter, Walton closed his mouth and nodded grimly. The princess wants to learn how to make fire, huh? Are you tired of giving orders to your servants, girl? I live in the open too, now Myrcella reminded him. I suppose it'll come handy. What other skill you'd want to learn other than making fire? Hunting. Yes, I'd like that, too, please. Walton let out a laugh, but Pia smacked him on the arm. I'll teach her, stop glowering at me. This is your lucky day, girl, Walton finally said, standing up to gather shredded bark and mosses. About how to hunt, I'm not sure. Better ask the king, since you'll need to learn with a bow or snares. Can't guarantee that your hand of yours will remain smooth, though, he laughed disparagingly. Walton taught her about small materials she will need to build a good fire. Dry grasses, barks, twigs, or fallen leaves ignite easily. Using a dagger, he showed her how to shred the materials as fine as possible before arranging the twigs and tinder in the shape of a cone. He paused here and there to judge Myrcella's own fire pit, unexpectedly being more patient than he ever was. Now the important part is how to start the fire. Myrcella was eager with anticipation, remembering the last time she tried to light one. You'll need a piece of iron and flint. You can find flints everywhere, and men in the open always carry blades, so there you go, Walton explained, producing his dagger again. He took her to the edge of her pavilion where there were many rocks and showed her how to look for a flint. Identifying it was not as hard as she thought, once Walton told her what to look for. Myrcella picked up a small rounded rock, dark grey in color, and Walton nodded his satisfaction. With skillful hands he used the back of his knife to strike sparks by striking it to the flint. In no time, the embers inside the cone nest he built started to catch sparks from the iron. Now, you try. Looking at her own fire pit, whose form messier than Walton's, she was unsure. Have a little faith, girl. Walton rasped. Using Walton's dagger she mimicked what Walton just did with the flint. At first she was stiff and awkward, but as she slowly recognized the rhythm, a spark began to appear. She squealed excitedly, growing more confident. It took her longer than Walton to produce a steady spark that was enough to ignite the tinder. But once the tinder lights, it spreads to the kindling. Walton showed her how to blow softly on the ember, to make sure the flames spread evenly to the kindling and wood. Once they finished, a good little fire was blazing from the pit she made, although not as neat and as big as Walton's fire. "Well done, girl. You did it, milady. They say a person needs 3 things to be happy in this world: someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for." It was strange but began to feel real to her, of how she was away from everything she knew, yet there were these moments of undeniable joy. The way Pia flung her arms around her, forgetting their stations but the uncalculating friendship, or of the way Walton grinned at her, the kind of smile he reserved only for Pia. Only this time she could feel someone ever proud and happy of her. And for a moment she forgets that weird, heavy feeling bugging her. "I never like it when they call him the young wolf." Pia glanced up from her plate and raised an eyebrow. "But it is a flattering title, isn't it, milady?" "Feels like a bad omen," said Myrcella, playing with her boiled potatoes. Tonight they sup on potatoes and what remains of a chop, seasoned with salt. It was considered a hearty meal in the middle of the woods. Like he will always be young, never to grow old, she shuddered at the thought. Pia put down her fork. "You didn't eat again?" "I'm sorry." Myrcella shook her head. "Something is troubling you." Myrcella bit her lip. Why she even voicing her thoughts, she thought to herself as she attacked her potatoes with the fork. It rolled from her plate and fell to the ground. Pia hurriedly got up from her seat and picked up the potato. "Oh, I'm so sorry." "You've been jittery all day," said Pia, concerned. "Is something wrong?" "It is different tonight," she managed to say, trying to find the right words. "Rob, I mean, King Rob, has won many battles. Isn't he something?" Pia smiled. "He is," Myrcella thought with a weird swelling pride that she knew she should not feel. She opened her mouth again to say something when she heard screams and the sound of frantic mules from the other side of the camp. Pia ran to the overlapping canvas door and parted it open. Black smoke rose in the distance, so thick even in the night it glows above a blazing flame. If Myrcella remembered correctly, it comes from the direction where the logistic tents are. "Fire!" Pia gasped. "Stay inside the tent." Walton came to them, sword in hand. Shoutings from outside the tent became louder, closer to their pavilion. The flames take every attention, but Walton stood his ground in front of her tent with 3 other guards, swords in hand. Cows and mules screamed as flames touched their bodies, and Myrcella could hear panic engulfing the camp. She began to be able to see clearly through the canvas wall, thanks to the growing flames. Thick smoke started slipping in through the canvas. Coughing, Pia parted the canvas door and Myrcella saw flames dancing in the night sky. It was a rather beautiful view, if not the screaming and the terror it caused. "There are 3 hot spots," Walton said nervously. Myrcella saw what he meant. Fire ablazed from the far end of the camp where the supplies tents were. Then from the right side of her pavilion, a second flame burned the makeshift stables where they kept the cows, mules, and horses. A third flame erupted from the tent where injured men were being treated. Myrcella was afraid to imagine what happened to the healers and their patients. Could they get out of the tent in time? "We must go," he said urgently, stepping into the tent. "Can't they put out the fire?" asked Pia. "I don't think it's just a fire." Walton snatched Rob's surcoat from a chair and threw it at Myrcella. "Put that on. We're leaving." Something in his tone made Myrcella obey the man without much questioning. Pia turned to Myrcella. "Do you still have the knife?" "What?" she asked, incredulous of Pia knowing. "Do you?" she pressed. "Why, yes." Pia snatched a knife from the table, the one they used to cut their meat. She slipped the knife behind her garter belt underneath her skirt. "Use the knife if they are close enough," she reminded Myrcella, who started to shake. "Who are they, Pia?" "I don't know, but it is definitely not our king. Most likely your brothers. I will not let them hurt you." Pia smiles at her. "Don't worry about me." Walton peeked outside the tent, communicating inaudibly with his other 3 comrades. "Let's go." The 6 of them ran into the night, leaving the camping ground. Walton directed them towards the vernal pool, looking back through his shoulders every time, out of fear they were being followed. Her footsteps thudded on the hard ground, clouds began to cover the moonlight and she had difficulty to see clearly. Pia snatched her hand, guiding her. They came to the pool, the surface as clear and as still as she remembered, but they did not stop. They kept on running through the dark pine trees. "We're going to the sentries," she heard Walton tell Pia. "I hope it's not what I think it is." He began to slow down his running pace, until he gestured for Pia and Myrcella to halt. A thin rope stretched over the ground, so thin and blended perfectly with the tall grass. Unsuspecting visitors who did not know the rope was there would step on it, alarming the sentries. Walton whistled softly. No answer. "Fuck," one of the guards stumbled something on the ground. "Walton?" Pia asked, fear in her voice. "What happened?" Myrcella stood on tiptoes to look over Walton's shoulders and almost screamed to see 2 men on the ground, their necks split open. A dire wolf embossed on the sentries' armors, marking them as Northmen. "They're here," Walton hissed. "We've been breached. What should we do?" Walton put a finger on his lips. Thunder rumbles above their heads. Her 4 guards pressed close to her and Pia, their swords pointing to the darkness of the night. They ran in the dark woods, hand in hand. She felt her shoes come loose somewhere, but she did not slow down. Neither did Pia. In the dark they broke through bushes and tripped over a thicket. The heavy air began to make her short of breath and her corset pricked at her ribs. "Where do we have to run to?" she wanted to ask Pia. "What is happening?" "Don't slow down," Walton had warned. "Run." The men who came at them were too many. Soon her guards fell, leaving only Walton standing. That was when he told them to run. "Run and don't look back." The next time Myrcella tripped over a root, she fell and tore her gun. Pia knelt before her, helping her up when a figure came from behind a tree, smacking her in the head. "Pia." Her friend lay on the ground, her eyes closed. "You killed her." "She's not dead," the figure spoke. "I've been looking for you, little princess. Your guards took you so fast." "Oh, you smell nice in this horseshit woods." The figure made a move towards her. She took a step back. For a second the clouds made way to the moon, the silvery light fell on him. To her surprise, she knew his face. He was one of the 4 men sent as messengers from King's Landing. He had been silent back then in Rob's tent, keeping his head down, but she remembered him perfectly. The man was ugly, like a living dead. His veins were showing in the pale skin of his face. The thin hair damps to his scalp, and he wore a tattered, ragged cloak. When he grinned, it was sinister. "We came to take you back to King's Landing." The man reached out to her, but Myrcella refused to be touched by him. "Is this my mother's doing?" She directed her hand towards the burning camp. She could still hear the sound of people and mules screaming, surrounded by fire that split the stillness of the night. "Your mother, the imp, or your grandfather, who cares? My job is taking you to them, and that is what I will do." He started pulling her towards the woods. Something in his accent made her realize he was not from her house. He was not even from the Westerlands, even Westeros. "Who are you?" she demanded, afraid. "Is that important?" he scoffed. She fought his ruthless pull. "Let me go. We don't have time for this." "No." She tried to fight him again when the man tried to grab her waist. He was skinny but stronger than her, easily outpowered her even before she could take out her knife. Without much difficulties the man lifted her on his shoulder, carrying her deeper into the woods. "Don't make me hurt you, little princess," he panted angrily, trying to get hold of her as she kicked and screamed, hitting his back. Her wild, frantic movements soon made the man drop her again. Once her feet touched the ground, her balled fist automatically drifted to the man's face, hitting him right on his nose. She screamed along with the man. She, out of shock and the way her knuckles throbbed, and the man because of pain. He shouted angrily. Myrcella took her chance to run, but the man lurched at her, his eyes watered. Rain began to fall just as Walton had predicted. "Bitch," he howled, grabbing her ankle, and Myrcella crashed to the hard ground. "Stupid cunt. I am taking you to the queen." She screamed, but her voice was lost in the roaring thunder. Her kicks sent the man bellowed furiously, both soaked by the pouring rain. Myrcella lying down on the muddy ground, hands trailing in search of rock to defend herself with. She managed to hit him once before he caught her hand holding the rock. "Stop," he warned dangerously. "In these woods you're just a pretty cunt." Another thunder rumbled, the lightning splitting the dark sky. The man's face above her was violent and full of anger. Blood flowed from his nose that she punched. He reminded her of Joffrey, and she had never been afraid in her whole life. "Why are you doing this?" she cried, trying to free herself from his grasp. It was in vain. He was too strong, too ruthless, and too violent for her to fight. Muddy water seeped under her clothes. It was not just a rain, but a torrential downpour. "I'm to take you to King's Landing," he hissed, his face so close to hers that she was able to smell his breath. His grip on both of her hands tightening. "But not with your maidenhead, I think." "Who would know? There's no one here anyway. I could blame it on that Stark boy." Her fingers clawed at the mud, as if digging her escape. The man was too strong. She tried to kick him again, but he sat on her stomach, straddling her, laughing. The rain poured down on them and she was blinded by tears and rainwater. Another lighting drowns her scream. The man let her hands go to unlace his trousers. Myrcella tried to roll over to reach the knife behind her corset, but the man slapped her across the cheek with one hand. "Don't even think about it," he mocked. "Keep that pretty mouth shut and I will let you keep your tongue." "Robb," she screamed, didn't even realize what she was saying. "No one will hear you, not in these woods, in this rain." He groaned when Myrcella's fingers went to his face, clawing. He slapped her again when she tried to rise from the ground. The blow was so hard that Myrcella's head pushed back and hit a rock on the ground. Instantly her vision darkened by the impact, making her body go weak. The downpour came at her, entering her nose, her mouth, choking her. She felt the man's hands on her thighs, forcing her legs apart to give him access. "I've never had a princess before." Thunder rumbles again. A flash of lightning illuminated the dark sky, and Myrcella opened her eyes to look at the man above her. She felt something poking between her legs, making her feel sick. "Let's find out if you're still a maiden." Her head was still dizzy from the previous collision, but her hands went to the man's face, aiming for his eyes. The man struck her again. "If they lay a hand on you, I'll break their every bone before I have their heads." Robb's voice was ringing in her ears. "Robb will kill you." He was too busy tearing her dress and securing her hands at the same time to hear her. But even in the heavy rain and thunder above, she recognized the familiar sensation. A killer was near. Thunders had muffled the sound of its steps, but she knew the direwolf didn't need any silencer to stalk its prey. His screams sent shrill to her, more shocking than when Grey Wind snatched him right on the shoulder, throwing him off her body like a ragged doll. Blood was spurting from his severed arm, making the flow of water on the ground red. The man's screams as he was mauled by the direwolf made her blood run cold. It tore the night, competing with the thunderstorm. She blinked to adjust her eyes as the rain obscured her sight. She thought she heard horses neighing, and someone was calling to her. Perhaps she was dreaming again. Finally, the man stopped screaming. She gasped when a hand touched her, sending her to panic. "It's me," came Pia's voice, and Myrcella stopped fighting. Pia helped her sit, and she saw Walton kneeling by the man's unmoving body, the tip of his dagger sunk in the man's neck to end his misery. Another lighting and she saw how she was surrounded by red. Her grandfather's color is red. The soil beneath her was red. The color of the blood. She retched and cried in Pia's arms. Grey Wind was snarling into the dark sky. In the heavy rain its fur bristled. Its paws were scratching the wet ground. The legs were rigid. "The wolf is angry," Walton observed, keeping his eyes low, crouching near the ground submissively so he won't provoke the agitated direwolf. "Crawl to me and don't look him in the eye." She felt Pia's shaking arms go around her waist, gently urging her to Walton. All of a sudden Grey Wind was on their side, its blooded snout inches from their faces. When it let out a snarl, Myrcella could feel Pia shaking violently that she thought Pia might have collapsed any moment. She too, was trembling by the downpour, and by fear and hatred for the man who now lay dead on the ground. But she shifted in front of Pia, shielding her, so now she and Grey Wind came face to face. She averted her gaze to show submissiveness. The direwolf won't hurt her, she knew it. Despite that, she also understands the beast was of its own mind, and her hand shaking as she reached out to Grey Wind. She could feel the direwolf's restlessness and was afraid that it might snap. Girl, Walton warned. It's all right, she whispered. To herself, to Grey Wind, or to Walton, she did not know. It's all right, she repeated, crying and shaking. We're all right. It seemed like forever until her fingers touched Grey Wind's wet fur. At her touch, the direwolf stopped growling. She ventured its snout gently, still avoiding eye contact as Walton advised. Her hands stroked the direwolf's tensed neck. Thank you, she whispered. The muscles under her touch calmed down. Grey Wind sniffed her, and she dared to finally look into its yellow-golden eyes. It was serene, intelligently staring back at her. Walton crawled to them, pulling Pia away from the direwolf's range. The rain began to thin out. The direwolf circled her, eyes watching the dark woods. Pia was still trembling and she cried when Walton told her he was going to the camp to take a look. The rain had extinguished the fire and the screaming had long stopped. No, no, don't leave us, she begged, clutching Walton's arm. You'll be safe with the wolf. I won't be long, I need to check if there's any survivor. Watch the girl and remain in the shadows, he silenced her with a kiss before running back towards the camp. There was a foul smell that lingered in the air. She sat on the wet ground with Pia, both trembling by the cold, hugging each other for warmth. They were too afraid to light a fire. She was sure she heard the sound of horses in the distance, but friends of foe she did not know. Hours must have passed and Walton has not come back, to Pia's dismay. Grey Wind continued snarling into the dark, circling them protectively. The sound of horses getting louder, coming closer to them, and Pia pulled Myrcella to her feet. Grey Wind became agitated all over again, and it growled increasingly ferocious. We've to go, she said, putting on a brave face. But Walton, Pia looked as if she wanted to cry again. He said to look after you. Let's go. I don't know who's coming, enemy or not. She had pulled the knife and held it with a shaking hand. Myrcella pulled her own knife from behind the corset. Following her friend, they started to make way in the woods when the sound of hooves reached them. Grey Wind snapped back to stand between the approaching sound and them, baring its teeth. Riders began to appear from between pine trees. In the dark they looked menacing, swords and arrows rose high in their hands. Myrcella tried to look in the dim light to find any sigils to give away to whom they fight for, but she did not find any. Urswick, the man sitting on Azus roared. Urswick. Grey Wind snarled at them. The wolf is here. There were 8 of them, Myrcella count, blooded and battered. The 9th man came to the leader on his Zus, whispering something. The leader was a tall and gaunt man with a goatee from a pointed chin. He wore a helmet with the horns of a goat, a chain made of strange coins rattled around his neck as he moved. When he spoke, he made a slur sound like his mouth was full of saliva and the tongue swollen. So the wolf killed Urswick, said the man, looking rather unconcerned. He looked at Grey Wind in a strange awe. The tales were right, after all. That wolf is monstrous. Now which one of you is the princess? Grey Wind growled, making the mounts retreat and its riders shouting. Who are you? Myrcella found her voice. My name is Vargo Hoat, the helmet-wearing man told her, spitting as he spoke with the weird accent. He inclined his head upon seeing her, eyes locked to her messy golden hair. Tywin Lannister sent us. That golden hair. You must be the princess, eh? His eyes scanned them, accessing Grey Wind. To her horror she saw 2 of the men pointing arrows at Grey Wind, the rest raising their arrows and their swords. Kill the wolf. No. Grey Wind leaped before the archers released their arrows, jumping onto one of the horsemen, dragging him into the dark. Its victim's screams echoed among the trees before it was silent once again. The horses and the Zus began to move wildly, tomping on hind legs as if trying to throw their riders. Where's the wolf? Where's the fucking wolf? The man named Vargo Hoat exclaimed angrily, spitting on every word. The Zus squeals noisily. A second man screamed when Grey Wind leaped, catching him on the waist and dragged him into the dark. Arrows were shot to where Grey Wind hauled the man. Pia pulled her to run just as Vargo Hoat kicked the Zeus towards them. The rest of his men followed suit. Myrcella raised her hand that was holding the knife. It was too small to fight a man atop a mount with his arak swinging dangerously, but she was determined not to be carried out so easily. Grey Wind took out the third man and trampled over the fourth. Idiots. Kill the fucking wolf. It's too fast. Their arrows kept missing the target, hitting the ground or the trees instead. Both girls screamed when the Zeus stomped wildly just inches from their standing ground. Pia managed to drive her knife into the Zeus' thick skin, slicing the flesh. Vargo made an angry shout as he fell from his mount, swinging the arak in his hand. "You're such a tease," he bellowed, "why is it so hard to come with us? We won't hurt you." Myrcella wrapped her fingers around the knife, the blade facing out to Vargo. He let a guttural laugh, almost inhuman, didn't show the slightest fear at the two girls in front of him holding knives with trembling hands. The arak shone under the moonlight. Myrcella had never seen a blade so sharp, almost like Valyrian steel. He'd easily slice them apart. There was a commotion coming from the scorched camp. Vargo raised the arak and it swung down to Pia, cutting the air as it came with such ferocity. Something hard cast them down. Myrcella felt herself fall onto Pia as they crashed onto the ground. For a second she thought she was dead, searching for her friend to make sure Pia was unhurt. The arak was blocked in the middle of its swing by Walton's sword. Vargo let out a grunt, swinging the curved weapon to Walton. Bushes trembled, the rest of the raindrops fell from dark branches. The cold wind rustled between the trees as the sound of horses approaching again. "We are going to die," Myrcella thought. There were so many of them. The arak got to Walton's arm, blood spurting, and Pia screamed. "Pia, take the girl," he shouted, blocking more blows. "Go. Go where?" Myrcella wanted to scream. But they ran again, without knowing where their feet were taking them. "We will never outrun the horses." A horn was blown. When she looked over her shoulder, dark shadows wrestling in where she left Walton and Grey Wind. Her heart was pounding hard, her clothes dirty and torn, her feet were bleeding from running barefoot. More hooves shook the ground, announcing incoming riders. Myrcella stopped to look and her heart skipped a beat to see something flutter in the dark sky. A direwolf banner. A man came at them on foot, swinging his arak. By pure instinct Pia and Myrcella flung their bodies in the opposite direction, avoiding the coming blade. In the darkness the man could not distinguish which girl he should take, and he was stunned for a moment, confused. The girls saw an opportunity, and together they drove their knives into the man's unprotected neck. Something warm washed over her hand, a salt metallic smell used to gag her, but now Myrcella no longer cared. "Pia." Walton's voice broke through the hustle in the woods. Myrcella tried to locate Walton but failed. More men came at them. The blood made her grip slippery on the knife, but Myrcella held it tighter, ready to defend herself and Pia. Before any impact, Pia threw herself to Myrcella, pulling her huddled on the ground, as swords and araks rang above their heads. In the dark Myrcella could not distinguish which one was the enemy. When it was all finished, she opened her eyes to see bodies lying on the ground. A horse trotted towards them. The rider went down from the mount before reaching out to Myrcella. Grey Wind stalked silently behind him. Myrcella tried to stand on shaky legs. The knife fell from her trembling fingers as she narrowed her eyes to see who he was. Robb. Clouds parted and the moonlight lit where they stood. It was Lady Brian. Her face was dirty and pale, soaked in blood. Hers or enemy's blood, Myrcella was afraid to find out. Thank God. Lady Brian's broad shoulders shook. Thank God. I thought we're late. She ran to Lady Brian, to Grey Wind, throwing her arms to take them into one embrace. "Is it over?" she sobbed to Lady Brian's cobalt blue armor. "Please tell me it is over." "I suppose it is." The smell was awful, blood and charred flesh and ashes. The damp earth sent a musky smell that did not completely cover the stench. More horses emerged from behind the trees, but horror lifted from her chest the moment she saw the sigils. Robb's bannerman. Walton ran to them, yanking her from Brian's embrace. Fear radiated from his eyes. "I'm fine. I'm not dead," she told him weakly, knowing his worst fear. But Walton, you're hurt. He only let out a breath of relief and did not answer. In fact, he did not seem to hear her anymore after she told him she was fine. Walton turned to Pia, and Myrcella never saw anyone ever embraced someone so hard, so fierce, yet so undemanding. Pia squeezed him back, burying her face on his chest. "Are you all right?" Brian asked. "We cannot go back to the camp, not until we know how much damage it sustained." "Why are you here, Lady Brian?" she suddenly remembered. Robb never came back from his campaign this soon. It had only been 3 days. "You returned so quick from the campaign. Who are they? Where is Robb? Did he win? Is he safe?" So many questions running in her head. A grunting sound from behind Brian made Myrcella turn her attention in time to see Grey Wind. The direwolf whimpered, throwing its head towards the gloom sky and howled. Grey Wind. The direwolf keeps on howling. Her heart was torn at the sound. She never heard something so sad. It was as if the beast was in pain. Not far from Sarsfield, an arrow hit Robb in the chest. Notes. Asterisk fun, or not so fun. Fact asterisk. Did you already know that Walton is my OC? Happy smiley. My muse for Walton is Paddy Considine. My muse for Pia is Halliday Granger. I listened to The Winds of Winter by Raymond Jawadi excessively for this chapter. Now my head throbbed whenever I heard the song played over @_at. Asterisk credits asterisk. A person needs just 3 things to be truly happy in this world: someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for. Was a quote by Tom Bodett. Chapter 20. Chapter text. BRIENNE. Brian strode along the scorched ground, watching as men gathered charred bodies to put inside the mass burial they had dug. It was a shallow pit of 30 meters wide. By midday all the bodies were buried. If most of your friends are burned to death, there wasn't much left but ash and black body parts. Intact corpses were the bodies of those who were tasked with guarding and not burnt in tents. Although she was angry to see the destruction of their camp and to witness her comrades' bodies piled in the mass grave, Brian had no time to nurture the feelings. They lost most of the men that were left to guard the camp. Dozens of tents used for recovery of the injured were burned to the ground, with no survivors. All the livestock were slain. Robb had lost his supply lines. What's the count? 60 riders came with us. I think the rest caught up on the way or protected the king. 12 fallen. Did you find their bodies? 11 of them, aye. The 12th must be Sir Patrick of Seaguard. I saw him riding with us and got thrown from his horse, but he's not among survivors. Brian remembered the air of Seaguard. They never spoke much even when they often met in the sparring yard and had ridden to battles with the young wolf. She felt sorry for his father, faintly recalling a conversation when he spoke fondly of the old Lord of Seaguard, now bedridden with sickness to the bowel that prevented him to march. Look for his body as you prepare the perimeter for us, Brian said. His armor was purple and silver, with the family sigil on his chest. An eagle. Yes, lady. Brian turned her attention to another man besides her. Anyone captured alive? Just one, said the man, taking her away from the mass grave. It was Vargo Hoat. He was seated under a tree, guarded by several men. One of his legs was missing, bitten by the direwolf. Brian herself threw him off his mount, breaking his arm, when they collided in the woods. When he saw Brian approaching, the man grinned. His face still looked fierce even though he could no longer take up arms. I was hoping to see pretty face before I die, he sneered cruelly. That little princess will do. Brian brandished his weapon of choice. The crescent moon-shaped arrow shone under the blaring sun, its reflection blinding her eyes. This is a Dothraki weapon, said Brian, watching how Vargo trembled in pain. They had no salt to stop the bleeding, and they did not want to waste a good iron to cauterize his wound, so the severed leg was tied tightly by a horse's reins. Aye, he growled, the face full of scorn. Using the blade, Brian touched the necklace on Vargo's neck. You're a sellsword. Aye, he said again, flinching by the pain. Who sent you? What do I get from answering your question? A quick, merciful death. He spit. How about a fuck? But not with you, ugly bitch. The only fuck you'll get is from this. Clifford Swan unsheathed his sword, but Brian stopped him. You're going to die, anyway. She pointed to his leg. Blood had seeped onto the grass beneath him and he was as pale as a corpse himself. All of your friends were dead, we piled their bodies not far from here for the crows. Soon you'll be joining them. Do something good for yourself. Who sent you? What is your mission? He started to laugh. I used to chop my prisoners' hands and feet. The black goatee dangling from his chin shook as he laughed and spat at the same time, slobbering as he spoke. They all screamed. I screamed. His spit hit Brian's face when he laughed again, delirious of his wounds. And they begged for mercy. No, no, no. Vargo never gave mercy, oh but their flesh never goes waste. We sell them, sometimes we just eat them. How many monsters does Tywin Lannister have? Clifford Swan couldn't contain his disgust. Tywin, eh? Vargo's eyes found the young man's face. He promised us half of the gold in Casterly Rock, and even prettiest maidens from all corners of the Seven Kingdoms if we destroyed Robb Stark's camp and take the princess back. Vargo began to shook and gasping for air as his body gave into shock, blood seeping out from the open wound. He lost too much blood. Where is Tywin Lannister? Brian grabbed Vargo's shoulder to keep him conscious. She slid the man to the ground, noticing how his pupils dilated into vacant air. Tywin, Vargo coughed and vomited, he's not here. He's gone. He deserves to die in agony, a man said without sympathy, and Brian knew no one will shed a tear upon Vargo Hoat's death. Ugly bitch. You lose. You, Vargo's curse was cut short as his body began convulsing. Brian dropped her hands and watched silently until the body finally lay motionless. Where's the princess? There. Clifford gestured to the vernal pond. The king's direwolf won't leave her side. When she found the princess, she sat on one of the rocks by the pool, Robb's direwolf at the heel of her feet. Grey Wind's golden eyes were watching Brian as she approached. The girl's golden locks hanging down from her surcoat, or rather, the young wolf's surcoat, which she knew did not make Robb's bannerman happy to be given to the princess. Brian nodded at Walton and Pia, all of them sported the same half-opened eyes, fatigue and fear. It held an edge of anticipation for a new day in a new place. They had not slept all night as adrenaline was still high in their system. Lady Brian. Myrcella greeted, her voice was a shrill in the woods that now smells of corpse and ashes. She had washed her face from dirt and blood, but her hair a disheveled mess above a ruined gown and blistered feet. Myrcella Baratheon did not look like a princess in the mud and rag, but perhaps it is a good thing for them now. Is King Robb all right? She knew Myrcella had waited all night to ask her. I don't know, she answered truthfully. I left him in Sarsfield when we realized there was something odd in the battlefield. I've sent some riders to check on Sarsfield before we depart, Brian said, somewhat doubting why she informed this to the princess. Brian turned to Walton and continued, we lost a lot of people last night. Walton grunted. Brian looked back at the princess again. I'm afraid Sir Patrek was among the fallen. I know you're quite close to him, my lady. If so, I offered you my condolences. Tears welled up in the princess' eyes. He is a good man. Is there any chance that he might be all right? Perhaps left behind to help King Robb. The childlike hopefulness in her voice was heartbreaking. She shook her head. One of my men saw him get thrown off from his horse. We found the horse dead, but have not found Sir Patrek's body. My lady, when will we go to Sarsfield? Walton asked. When the riders come back safely. There were some Tywin sellswords who managed to escape. I'm afraid they are still around here with the rest of his army. Sellsword? My grandfather sent sellswords to retrieve me. Yes, Brian studied the little girl's face before her, wondering. Why didn't you go with your grandfather's men? She had to ask, curious. I don't know. There were many opportunities while she was in the woods, without any guards, that she could have run away. Or just simply went with the men Tywin sent to retrieve her. The girl did neither. Apparently, Tywin did not want to waste his army and chose to send sellswords to bring his granddaughter, the crowned princess, back. Sellswords cannot be trusted, their loyalty lies only to gold, and perhaps the girl did the right thing not to go with them. A maid must be mistrustful in this world, or she will not be a maid for long, Hercepta harshly said. She looked hard upon the girl, who did not return her gaze. Brian did not ask further. She also remembered what Vargo had said, that Tywin Lannister left. But where? Brian pondered. Wherever Tywin went, his army must be with him. There were not many that could be saved from the camp. If it didn't rain that night, there would be more damage. The enemy made use of the shock effect from their unpreparedness for maximum results. Myrcella said she recognized one of the attackers as the man who came to deliver Ned Stark's bones and House Stark's ancestral Valyrian sword. Fortunately, the morning they marched to Sarsfield, Robb had sent those two valuable things to Riverrun for safekeeping. All of these had been carefully planned by the enemy, and what else? Brian thought, watching Robb's direwolf stand up and swirled nervously around the princess. Grey Wind was not calm as usual. It would look west towards Sarsfield, whined, before sitting down by the princess' side, only to stand up again and circling the girl nervously. Last night the direwolf howled for hours into darkness and only stopped when dawn approached. Something must have happened, Brian thought, sharing Grey Wind's distress. Whatever it was, they'd find out sooner or later. When night fell, they finished collecting what could be scavenged from the scorched camp. Galbart Glover gathered the highborns to discuss their next steps. They sat around the fire pit, trying to keep warm as their armor rubbed shoulder to shoulder. Brian knew all of them were tired and uncomfortable. The princess should be taken to Riverrun, Benfred Tallheart proposed. The light from the fire pit illuminated his broad, freckled face. It is not possible to bring such a hostage to Sarsfield. No, I'm afraid they'll come to get her again, Brian argued, better not splitting this time. Not many have succeeded in coming back here from Sarsfield. But Lord Bolton was right, we shouldn't have marched. We should have waited for the Vale to answer, Benfred continued, though they won't answer us. They are loyal to the Iron Throne. Lady Arryn is no longer in power, now that Warden in the East is a Lannister puppet. We made a mistake by marching to Sarsfield. Did you just insult your king's command? Galbart shouted. If you're my son, I'll smack that nonsense out of you. My lords. Brian raised her voice. Benfred scowled but said nothing. This felt like their first loss in the war, and it was hard to swallow. Robb's bannermen were thinking about their king and of their comrades. Brian did not blame them. She was anxious to return to Sarsfield as their numbers here were too few. What are you suggesting, Lady Brian? Clifford asked. She winced at the courtesy title. We shall wait until noon, on the morrow. Riders should have come back by then. Riverrun, if, she cleared her throat, if Sarsfield was not taken by the king, if they lost. For once, none of the men spoke up against her nor sneered. It was another long night before the golden sun shone on the horizon. Brian couldn't enjoy the slightest warmth of it. Riders did come back at noon the next day, just as Brian predicted. Sarsfield was indeed taken by Robb. The riders saw direwolf and stag flying from the castle towers. However, the riders added grimly, they were surrounded by Lannister's bannermen. If they come, they'd have to defeat at least 2,000 troops besieging the castle. No way Tywin led only 2,000, Galbart commented. The Old Lion chooses to face Stannis in the capital, leaving the Westerlands for us. We've only 40 and 8 mounted men. 50 and 5 footmen, and a dozen unarmed people, including the princess. We cannot attack them from the rear, they'll finish us off before our friends can get out of the castle. We're fucked. Hendry Breckin spoke up for the first time. The nephew of Lord Jon Osbrekin of Stonehenge in the Riverlands was one of Robb's highborn battle companions. Not the kind of fuck I'd prefer, but yes, we're fucked. Galbart fumed. I should have stayed with my king. Died protecting him. You obeyed your king's order to return to the camp, Brian said. For that, we could save what must be saved. That Lannister abomination, he scoffed, unappreciative. Brian raised an eyebrow, a precious hostage to exchange with our friends and his younger siblings. A hostage, only fools still thought so. Galbart fumed, kicking the dirt with his boots. He seemed tempted to say something, but did not proceed further. They were like abandoned kittens torn from their mother's teats, confused about what to do and where to go. Even though it seemed impossible, they must move forward. They could not possibly return to Riverrun now, not when scouts found out Robb's and Stannis' standards were flying in Sussfield. But them, against 2,000 men at arms. Mayhaps she'd die before she could reach King's Landing, before she could touch Joffrey and the imp. If so, Brian hopes her father would find a new wife that can give him the heir he'd be proud of, a warrior son, or a lady daughter. She vowed to protect Renly, her sweet smiling king, and she failed. She went to Stannis and vowed to put the last Baratheon on the Iron Throne, and that too, she was afraid she might fail. They saddled their mounts in silence. Galbart Glover and Clifford Swan lead them away from the scorched camp. Brian chose to ride at the back of the column, taking Myrcella to ride on her horse. They could not move fast enough because not everyone has mounts. They must stay vigilant, for fear the enemy might come at them any moment. Soon darkness came, and the night heightened Brian's wariness. After a debate they finally agreed to make the biggest fire they could on the edge of the woods, attracting the enemy's attention before leading an attack from the flank. The flame will definitely attract their comrades' attention as well. If gods were on their side, perhaps they have a chance to win, who knows? Brian could only hope. It was a slightly dangerous plan, but it's still a plan that keeps hope alive in their hearts. Halfway to Sussfield she felt Myrcella's hand patting her shoulder. The direwolf had been stalking close to their side, but now Grey Wind was nowhere to be seen. At the same time, Galbart brought them to halt. They all stayed quiet, even the horses did not make a sound. Brian could feel the princess' quickened breath behind her. Their eyes were watching the dark woods, relying only on the moon above their heads. None of them carry a torch. Hendry Breckin's eyes met her in the dark, and he made a gesture that something, or someone, was closing in. Brian's hand descended to the hilt of her sword, ready to defend the princess and herself from any incoming attack. Then a howl split the night. They had been with Grey Wind for a time that they could recognize the howl. They gasped at the sound of horses whining in the distance. It was far, but the silent woods delivered the suspicious whine quick enough to their ears. Brian and Hendry drew their swords. In the dark they waited, forming a close formation, with mounted men standing guard outside the line. The sound of panicked horses was getting louder, giving away another party in the woods. Those were strangers' horses, as theirs were familiar to Grey Wind's scent that they stood silently with their riders. Another howl. But the direwolf never howls when it sees an enemy, Brian remembered thinking. It growls, and attacks. Lady Brian, came the princess' soft voice from behind her. Does it seem like Grey Wind is calling out to something? Aye. It is assembling, Walton agreed, looking surprised himself. What are you talking about? If she didn't see how serious they were, Brian would think both of them have gone crazy. The woods fell into silence once again, no rustling of wind among the leaves, no frantic sound of foreign horses in the distance, no sound whatsoever. It made Brian grow even nervous. She preferred noise, any noise, at least it could tell her from where the disaster would come from. The silence was not good. Galbart sent 5 footmen to go check in the direction where the sound of foreign horses was heard the last time. The men had not gone an hour when Grey Wind leaped from behind a tree, shocking 2 squires and a servant, making them fall to the ground, yelping. Lord. One of the men Galbart sent out came behind Grey Wind. You wouldn't believe who came. Bushes parted, dry leaves crackled under approaching hooves. From the sound of it, Brian knew it was not the sound of attack, but rather a slow, calculating step of riders approaching closer to their group. At first Brian was ready to attack when she saw the first banner in the vanguard. They were not sellswords, but she still did not know whether they were friend or foe. Standing before them were mounted men tripled the size of their host, as more shadows moved between the dark trees. All of them mounted, wearing chainmail and helmets and armors. More banners were coming closer. Brian glanced at the direwolf, expecting it to show aggressiveness, but Grey Wind was calm as its yellow eyes watched their new guest with interest. Greetings, my lords, a man spoke, though quite young. Brian saw his head was already balding. The wolf made our horses nervous as we were approaching, but the beast led us to you. We've come in peace. Peace. Galbart growled suspiciously. Which king do you serve, my lord? Narrowing her eyes to look better in the dark, Brian saw a blazon of black iron studs on bronze that bordered with some rune on the man's breastplate. As an answer, the balding man reached out to take something from his hip. Sword or dagger, Brian was ready. Chapter 21. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. The spider's little bird. Nights were darker when the battle happened. Crows covered the sky, perched on trees, polluted the ground. It came to feast on the corpses scattered about. The foul rotting smell lingered on skin no matter how hard she scrubbed, and she thought she started to smell like a dead person. A strayed crow cawing by the kitchen's window, and out of habit she shooed it away. The cook hates birds and cats wandering near the kitchen, stealing food. He'd beat her if he saw any animals roaming close. She was scared of him. He was not a nice man. He used to beat them, starved them, hurting them every chance he got. The cook wouldn't let her eat if she was not giving him those kisses that she hated. She went to bed hungry, or sore and bleeding. Even when she did give him kisses, sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night to find the cook on top of her, crushing her with his weight. "You've been misbehaved," he said, before proceeding to punish her. She hates him. But the spider was kind, she often thought of him fondly. He gave her sweets, once even let her taste a peach. She never tasted a peach. It was nice and juicy. The pockets under his robe hold a lot of food. She wondered if that's the reason he smelled so nice. Every time she met him, the spider would greet her with outstretched hands. There were times when he wasn't wearing his colorful damasks, but ragged clothes like a beggar in flea bottom. "Bread, or sweets?" he asked her in his soft, almost feminine-like voice. She always picked sweets. It soothed her loneliness and kept unwanted emotions at bay. "I need you to do something for me. When you're done, I will arrange for someone to pick you up, and you will never starve again. I will take care of you," the spider had promised. She found herself in the castle, away from the slum of Flea Bottom, from its stench and sticky stew pots. The spider told her to wait when the order to empty the castle was given by Lord Eldrick. She had been in this castle for a long time it seemed, and it had never been this quiet safe for the crows. Her barefoot feet hung from the chair she was sitting on, obediently waiting, listening to the endless sound of metal clattering from outside the castle. The battle was still ongoing. The crow came again, cawing eagerly looking for something to snatch. She was not alone in the kitchen. With her were her friends, huddled by the fireplace that was about to go out. "They've been waiting for days. Food supply has depleted. Lord Eldrick left the castle a fortnight ago, and since then no one had come out nor came in." She snuggled with her friends in the dark kitchen when the battle broke. The sound became unbearable on the second day, when finally she crept out from the kitchen and went to the watcher's tower just above the gate. Once she climbed the stone wall and perched herself inside one of the barbican walls, she dared to take a peek at the battleground below. The night did not provide much lighting for her, but she had stayed in the dark for so long that her eyes accustomed to darkness. She saw an army approaching, more many than the Lannisters' men that she saw just a few days past. Banners waved in the dark sky. They wore chainmails and boiled leathers. When the clouds shifted to make way for the moonlight, she could see they were soaked in dirt and blood from top to bottom. She tried to find her lord's banner, but none among the sigils that were approaching. The first wave of the victors started to make way to the castle, exhausted dying men scaling the walls. Makeshift ladders were put along the outer walls, and soon the invaders made their climb. She ducked in time before any of them saw her. A loud commotion was heard among the invaders, about the lack of resistance from inside the castle. Indeed, no archers, no men at arms. She was told they'd come and that they shall make a claim of the holdfast. Young Lord Eldrick could not do anything but yield to the order. She ran back to the kitchen where her friends were, to let them know. Perhaps they would like to hide, or just to brace themselves before the invaders take the castle. "They're outside." "But there's nothing here," said Bee from behind a blanket. Everyone had left. "They'll kill us," little Tim cried. Death is not so bad, she thought, tired. Boom. Boom. They were battering the gates. Boom. Her heart leaped to her throat as she sunk between little Tim and Bee, startled at every collision. Boom. How long the gates hold, She did not know. It seemed strong enough, didn't it? Boom. Boom. How long does it take 4 men to scale the outer walls? Boom. They are going to die, like little Tim said. Boom. Boom. The gate was taken down with a loud bam, which made Bee shrieked and little Tim cried louder. A roar was heard from outside the kitchen, of battle cries followed by confusion. Just like Bee said, there was nothing in the castle, other than darkness and silence. The invaders scoured the castle, they threw everything to the ground, opening every cabinet, ravaging every chamber, trampling every table. Lord Eldrick had made sure they left nothing. No weapons, no food. Just leave enough to sustain her and her friends until the castle is taken. The men were exhausted, hungry, and thirsty. There were so many of them she could count on, more than she ever saw in her life. Some of them were obviously the lords, though she did not know which house. She only knew her lord's sigil, a blasting arrow over a green field. Those banners were collected and burned in the yard. The flame bubbled up into the dark sky, making the crows noisy all over again. New ones were flying by the castle's towers and by the walls, a grey wolf and a black-crowned stag surrounded by fiery flame. 5 big men found them in the kitchen, trembling in fear, and she was sure they'd be killed when they were dragged to the castle yard. All food supplies that can be found were secured by the men. 3 children, Lord Bolton. Grim men glowering at them suspiciously. In her tattered clothing, she shivered in the windy night. The man whom they called Lord Bolton looked at them. She realized he has very strange eyes that reminded her of old milk. Where are your parents and the rest of the castle's inhabitants? His voice was like silk, gentle, flowing easily. They left, Lord said Bee, hugging little Tim tighter. Her shoulders shook. We don't have parents anymore. We work in the kitchen. Fat Gorge didn't want to bring us when they go. And when did they leave? A fortnight ago, Lord. Our Lord Bolton nodded slowly. What is your name, child? Bee. Bee, he repeated, the weird eyes scanning Bee's face, making her squirm. This is little Tim. And this is Ida, Bee offered weakly, pointing to her and little Tim. Upon hearing her name, Lord Bolton's gaze shifted. She felt her spine go cold and she hurriedly lowered her head, afraid to meet his out-of-worldly eyes. Lord Bolton's face was smooth and pale, unlike Fat Gorge the cook whose face was covered in smallpox scars. Yet both of them sent the same terrible signal. We found a well near the kitchen, my lord, a man-at-arms came to them. On his hands was a bowl of fresh water taken from the well. Lord Bolton sniffed at the bowl, making a swirl motion the way she saw Lord Eldrick did to his goblet, before giving it to little Tim. Drink it. Little Tim's whole body trembled in fear. When he took the bowl from Lord Bolton, some of the water spilled to the ground. He took one gulp of the water. For a long time that felt like eternity. Lord Bolton and his men watched little Tim closely, as if hoping him to drop dead at any given moment. He didn't, and Lord Bolton ordered the guard to bring little Tim to the kitchen. When he got sick, let me know at once. Until tomorrow morning, no one take a sip from the well, no matter how thirsty you become. Understood? Aye, my lord. Men lay in all corners of the castle, with the lords quickly occupying empty chambers. The wounded groaned loudly from their resting place, others just sat and stared blankly into the dark. Most of them fell asleep at midnight, claimed by fatigue. But not Lord Bolton. He set the 3 of them aside again, asking them about the castle. How long have they been living in the castle? What kind of tasks do they do around? How many men Lord Sarsfield had? Where did he go? Did they see Tywin Lannister? Nearly dawn, a group of riders came into the castle. Open the gates, a man roared. Fetch the maester. The king is injured. She was sleepy, tired and cold from standing in the yard answering so many questions. Sometimes she thought the question was a repeated one, just being rephrased, to determine whether they were lying or not. She did not lie, until the final question. Is there a way to exit the castle apart from the gate? Bee and little Tim shook their heads, crying. A tunnel, perhaps. Ida. No, lord, no. The smooth face did not show any emotion. Do you know what will happen if I find that tunnel? But there's no tunnel, Lord. Lord Bolton rose from the ground, having knelt to look them in the eye. Pity, he scoffed softly. He turned to his men. Put them to swords. Don't. A man was brought forward, leaning against the biggest and the tallest man she ever saw. He easily supported the injured man with his right hand, while on his left he held a shield with a sigil of roaring giant with broken silver chains. He did like a giant himself. The injured man on the giant's arm wheezed, his face pale as a corpse. She saw an arrow stuck slightly below the pectoral. They are just children. Children who could slit our throats in our sleep, Your Grace. Lord Bolton retaliated. Better not trusting them. Don't, the man warned again, angry. Watch them, watch, night and day. If that is your command, Your Grace. It is. Lord Bolton nodded curtly and retreated. Where's the Maester's chamber? The huge man bellowed, making her jump. Fetch him. No one in the castle, Lord B squeaked, shaking from head to toe. Just us. The giant started shouting profanities and curses of how Tywin Lannister tricked them. The injured man slid to the ground. A spiky crown made of iron sat on his auburn hair, making her wonder if he was the Wolf King the spider warned her about. He'd need to lay down. Being kept standing up made his heart pump more blood to the wound. He needs to lay down, she dared to say, remembering Maester Ioseth's advice every time a man was accidentally shot by an arrow. Sometimes a green soldier who was just learning archery could shoot his comrades, not the ballsy. The child is right, the injured man says, grinning. I think I'm going to pass out. Show me your lord's chamber. B came forward and they followed her friend into the castle. Another man came to her. This one wore a distinguished armor of black scales, just like a fish. Child, he said, his white hair stuck to his forehead, traces of blood on his tired face making her take a step backward. Where's the Maester's chamber? Bring me there. She nodded and led the way to what used to be Master Ioseth's solar. It was located on the same floor as the Lord's chamber. When she came to the door it was locked. The man did not hesitate when he produced a mace and started battering the oak door. It took him some time, draining him of any energy left in him, before the door gave in and he successfully broke the lock. The Maester did not have time to bring all his equipment and herbs when they left in hurry from the castle. Even though most of the shelves had been emptied, several bottles and dry plants were still in place. The man started to check the bottles, only to groan in frustration. Using the mace he broke down Maester Ioseth's desk and wooden crests, looking for something. Do you happen to know where the Maester keeps the milk of the poppy? She shook her head. He smashed the last crest, the contents rolled out when it was overturned, some scrolls, candles, old blanket, and, she heard the man sighed. Praise the Seven, he snatched the jar and ordered her to take him to the injured man. He was laying down in Lord Eldric's bed when they came to the chamber. The giant did not leave his side, but stood by the bedpost. Someone had made fire blazing in the hearth. It must be B. Nothing in here, Blackfish. They let us take an empty castle, the giant spoke up. She could see how the fish's face wrinkled in trouble, but he did not say anything other than thrusting the jar to his friend. Honey, for the wound, the fish said, before turning to her. Child, fetch water and a copper pan. She nodded, and despite her body was aching from standing in the cold night wind, she found herself running back to the kitchen. Little Tim was sitting on the floor, half asleep, watched by 3 men with an X sigil on their breastplates. She saw many sigils tonight and wondered where they came from. She couldn't find B, but the man who guarded the well helped her draw the water, as soon as she described the fish's appearance and of his order. She was too short to reach the winch. B only appeared when she returned to the kitchen, carrying a bucket of water. Help me with the pan, she said. Together they went back to Lord Eldric's chamber, hanging the pan in the hearth to boil the water, while 2 men conversed by the bed. Lord Bolton joined them shortly. She could hear them arguing about leaving the castle at first light, of returning to their camp, but were afraid the king won't make it. At least there's roof above our heads, and water. Water, the giant spat, that, if the Lannisters didn't poison the well. That is why I let one of the orphans drink it. We shall see, said Lord Bolton. The king cannot travel far, the fish argued. Our men are exhausted, We have better chance in here. Until when? Tywin Lannister let us take this castle. He trapped us. She looked back over her shoulder and caught the fish in the eye. Put more wood in the fire, he said. When the water boil, bring it here. I am Lord. I don't trust these orphans, Lord Bolton said, not bothering to lower his voice. What are you gonna do, flay them? The giant scoffed. Crossed my mind, he sneered. If his grace did not stop me. But he did, so they're under his protection, the fish reminded him. A pity. You don't know how easily they'd break when the skin is flayed, bit by bit. There was a groaning sound from the bed. The silhouette of the lying king looked helpless. His armor, the boiled leather and his clothes had been stripped from his flesh, now crumpled on the floor. We need to pull out the arrow. How? We cannot risk infection or doing anything that could make the wound worse. Water's boiling, Lord, she said. Carefully B and her lifted the pan from the hearth and brought it to the side of the bed. B found a clean cloth from Lord Eldric's drawer and put it near the pan. They waited for the water to cool down before the giant sniffed the water suspiciously. When she peered closer, she saw the arrow's shaft had been broken, leaving only inches from the wound surface. Your Grace, the fish called to the man on the bed, we will need to clean your wound. He gestured to her to move closer to the bed. Now that she was in range, she noticed the king begin to sweat excessively even though the air was not hot. I don't trust the water, Lord Bolton said in his silky voice. Me neither, the giant chimed in, wary. The water is not poisoned, Lord. We've drank it since we were left here, she found her voice, surprising before speaking up. Three men looked at her with mixed expressions. She thought how painful it is to be flayed, when a soft chuckle was heard from the bed. The Wolf King tried to raise his head from the pillow, but the pain the arrow caused prevented him to do so. He sank back to the bed, breathing hard. Just clean it. Let us hope that I don't die tonight. You must not die, lots of people forbade it. The Wolf King smiled through a facade of pain. I will try, uncle. She helped to clean his wound, washing away dirt and soil as much as possible. After it was cleansed, honey was smeared to reduce inflammation. The skin where the arrow pierced him began to turn red. She did not need to look at the three men to know what it meant, only hope that the wound did not fester. If it did, the Wolf King will surely die. You need to get this arrow off me. I can't do anything with this thing inside me. We dare not risk you bleeding to death. I've seen men die once the arrow is pulled out. Not without a maester or healer. We could cauterize the wound, the giant muttered. We could. But we don't know how deep the wound is. So we let our king suffer. Have you lost your wits, Blackfish? I'm going to die, either way, the wolf interjected. We can't stay long in here, we've to move. Any words from Lady Brian? The wolf looked expectantly at his men, but they shook their heads. His face fell. We need to head back. We must. His speech was cut short when he tried to get up from where he lay, accidentally putting pressure in where he was struck. He groaned, cursing. Weak horses were butchered and the flesh distributed among hungry men. There were not many, only a few, and quickly the horse meat ran out. They had to turn to other sources of meat. There were rats and cats, of course, plenty of them. And there were crows, too, so there'd be plenty of meat for some time. Cats do taste like a rabbit, it was just more chewy. Crows were just the worst, the flesh was dry and the texture was bad. It melted like ash in her mouth. It was the second night the invaders took the castle. With food gone fast, not that it was left much in the first place, almost none, half of the wounded succumbed to their wounds. Lucky ones died in their sleep, curling in the cold around the castle. Their bodies were burned beside the kennel as the men were too weak to dig graves. She ducked her head and ran stealthily whenever she had to come close to them, those invaders. But she had named some of them. At least the ones who she saw from time to time. First there was the Wolf King. He was put in her lord's chamber, the biggest solar in the castle located high above the great hall, in the lord's tower. Bee and herself took turns keeping watch by his bed, routinely applying honey to where the arrow hit. She was ordered to keep the fire burning so the Wolf King would at least feel a little comfortable. But he won't, she thought to herself. He'd only feel so, if the arrow in him was removed and he was no longer in pain. Second, there was the giant who often wandered the castle, bellowing orders and grunting uncomfortably. He wields the biggest sword she has ever seen. The giant is often to be found by the wolf's side, making her nervous by his unfriendly glare, along with the third man she called the Fish. And then there's Lord Bolton, with his X-sign sigil displayed proudly on his gorget. When she had the chance to look closely, she recognized it was in the shape of a flayed man, hanging upside down. The man frightened her the most. When little Tim did not die from drinking the water, and it was proven that the well was not poisoned, Lord Bolton seemed disappointed. He and the Fish sat her down and asked about the castle. It was Bee who had been in the castle the longest, and they both showed Lord Bolton and the Fish various passageways and narrow lanes within the castle. Men were scattered in the yard, in the garden, in the hallway, they shifted to give them away as they passed. Not much was left in the castle. The invaders were forced to use whatever was available to survive. No matter how she told Lord Bolton there's no other way to leave the castle but from the front gate, he did not seem to believe her. Those weird eyes the color of spoiled milk lingered at her more than on Bee or little Tim. She was certain the man could read her mind just by looking. She stood next to the wolf's bed, listening silently to his weak but steady breathing as she always did when the giant entered. This time he brought an apple, which must be taken from the apple tree growing in the garden. "Give it to Ida," said the wolf. "I prefer to see my king eats. I can't chew. This goddamn arrow forbids me. And if I could, I'll eat what my men eat," he said with finality in his voice. "If they had to eat worms, then I shall." The giant seemed annoyed and ready to oppose when the wolf spoke again, weaker. "Fetch me parchment and ink. Tell my great-uncle Brindon, I need him, and Lord Bolton, Sir Donal Swan of Stony Helm, every lords and highborns from the north, the Riverlands and Stormlands." She rushed to fetch the parchment, a quill, and a bottle of ink from Lord Eldric's desk while the giant bellowed order to a guard in front of the door. Heavy footsteps were heard not long after, and men cramped inside the chamber. They were looking haggard now, tired and hungry. The wolf motioned the parchment to the Fish, who took the quill and dipped it in the ink bottle. "I need you to bear witness," said the wolf. His face did not hide the pain he must felt, "that if I die, I name my brother Brandon." As his bannermen's faces were unreadable, the arrowhead was buried in his lower chest, no one dared to take it out. The Wolf King was not getting any better. The sound that was heard in the chamber was the scraping of the quill over the parchment, the crackling from the hearth, and the Wolf King's weakened breathing. "Myrcella Baratheon shall be returned safely to her close kin. The North will support Stannis Baratheon's claim of the Iron Throne, as long as the North and Riverland's independence, granted. And the Kingslayer, your grace. I entrusted his captivity unto Stannis. My sisters, Sansa and Arya, if Harwin found her, take them back to Winterfell. Shall Brandon die without issue, it will fall upon Rickon as his heir. Then to Sansa, and to Arya, but only as long as they are in Winterfell." He paused for a moment, sighing, "Shall my brothers perished, and God forbid, my sisters are not found nor cannot be taken back to Winterfell, find Jon Snow in the wall. I named him my heir after my true-born brothers. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Jon is half a Stark, my brother." The Fish finished scribbling and the Wolf King nodded his consent after reading the written form of his will. "Fix your seals to bear witness, my lords. Perhaps he will die before the sun rises on the morrow." She had heard his men debating whether to just pull the arrowhead and cauterize the bleeding, or not. She had stood by the wolf's bed, staring at the arrow shaft stuck in his body for hours. There was no blood seeping out, perhaps restrained by the arrow itself. She wasn't sure, but shouldn't every wound bleed? Is the absence of blood a good sign? Perhaps not, but she was just an orphan, what does she know about wounds and death? It was her turn to bring food to the Wolf King. When she came into his chamber again, the giant was still there, as usual, guarding the wolf. Sitting by the window ledge was Lord Bolton. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the tray of food on the table next to the bed. "What's this?" the Wolf King asked, examining the roast on the plate. "Supper. Cat meat," she answered, wondering for a second if she should call him by a title. "Baked with little salt found in the kitchen," the giant added. "Should have tasted better than horse meat." "Oh. Delicious, he commented dryly. Both men chuckled, before the wolf winced at this wound. How are things outside? Not good, the giant said, suddenly sullen. Darin Hornwood died. His death makes the death toll to 1/5 of our numbers, half of them are wounded. She was surprised to see the wolf's eyes glassy. Taste the meat, Lord Bolton instructed, pulling her away from further thoughts. Is that necessary? The wolf asked. If there's poison in it, then yes, Your Grace. She watched Lord Bolton cut a small bite from the roast and handed the fork to her. She took the bite, chewing dutifully. I want to bring Darin's bones to his family. She could hear the pain in the wolf's voice even when she was not looking. Her eyes found the parchment lay near the tray, the wolf's will. Wax with various sigils have been given by his bannerman. Brandon. Rickon. Jon Snow. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Winterfell, she read that again, carving the names in her head. You can read, Lord Bolton commented, startling her, not angry but rather interested. Who taught you? The spider. No, Lord, she replied, looking at her feet. No. She was scared. She should have been more cautious to find him in the chamber. No, Lord, she repeated again. Ida, leave us, the wolf said to her. She didn't wait to be told twice before running to the door. The sun began to set in the western horizon, dark shadows creeping around the castle. She watched silently until the men retired before slipping out from the castle, though it was difficult now that she sensed the invaders were on high alert all the time. Running barefoot to the eastern side of the castle, there was an old bathhouse used by servants and lower ranks of knights. The bathhouse also served to laundry the castle inhabitants' clothes. Fat Gorge planted a plot of land in front of the bathhouse with vegetables and corn. Lord Eldrick let the plants die when he abandoned the castle. Now those tall, dry stalks rustled eerily by the wind. She jumped into the sea of dead corn stalks that easily concealed her from peering eyes. She was not a tall kid to begin with, so it was easy for her to be swallowed among the stalks. Her ears were listening to any sound of people that might follow her, though she heard nothing but the wind. The damp soil and the rustling of dry stalks muffled her footsteps as she ran towards the bathhouse. The grey stones overgrown with moss soon welcomed her. Its iron door was rusty and left ajar. The invaders had checked the bathhouse twice and found nothing. Before she entered, she looked over her shoulder, to her right and to her left, just to make sure no one followed her. The floor inside was damp, the air humid and cold. She slipped while groping in the dark, trying to advance herself towards the end of the room where a long stone basin for washing clothes was located. She did not dare to bring any torch, afraid of being caught. There was a well inside the bathhouse, she remembered, to draw water from beneath the hill the castle was built on. Once she passed that well, she reached the stone basin and squatted to feel the floor until she found what she was looking for. The drainage was less than a meter wide, covered with iron trellises which she easily lifted. It revealed more darkness below. Rancid odor and moss filled her nostrils when she lowered herself into the sewerage. The sewerage was an old, mossy tunnel-like water outlet leading to the hill not far from the castle. Her thin body could move freely in the narrow alleyways. Some time had passed since the last time the bathhouse was used, so it was dry in the sewerage. In the middle of the way, soil erosion made half of the width buried under soil and rocks. It was narrow, small and stuffy, and could not be passed by average adult. Inside the sewerage she could not see a thing. She could only move forward by crawling, chest flat on the floor, both feet pressed to the ground to push her skinny body forward. Her elbows rubbed against the rough stone wall as she pushed herself to move. It didn't take long for her to reach the end of the sewerage, to a hidden hole reinforced with another trellis lid. She lifted the lid and crawled out, eyes blinded by the descending sun behind a hill. Once her eyes adjusted to her surroundings, she ran into the forest and whistled, mimicking a Malabar's bird call. At first she heard nothing from the forest, and kept on whistling, until a small face emerged from a bush. A boy of little Tim's age. The boy took a step towards her, whistling the same Malabar song. Even when she never saw him before, the bird's whistle made her feel close to him. That was a brotherhood song taught by the spider, a secret way to communicate among his little birds. The plan worked, she said. Say it clearly, the spider also taught them. Make it easy to remember, to be passed over. The wolf was hit by arrow to the chest. The boy nodded. They make a will. Brandon, his brow furrowed trying to remember the names. And Rickon. Jon Snow at the wall. Brothers before sisters, only if the sisters in Winterfell. He nodded. Is the spider coming? She asked. The boy frowned at her, as if her question offended him. Burn the highest tower when the wolf died, he said. They'll come. She nodded, watching the boy disappearing into the dark as fast as he came. Who'll come? Suddenly she was intrigued, but it was too late. The boy had long gone. A part of her wanted to run after him, to leave the crowded castle behind, to leave Fat Gorge and his painful stick between his legs if he ever comes back, and to escape from Lord Bolton's weird eyes. She was already taking 2 steps forward when she remembered Bee and little Tim. She knew she couldn't just leave her 2 friends behind. She looked around the opening, making sure she was alone. She picked up some berries to ease the pain in her growling stomach. As she ate, she remembered the apple that the giant brought, half-heartedly given to her by the wolf's order. She had given the apple to little Tim. No one but the spider ever gave her anything. She was helping Bee drawing buckets of water from the well in front of the kitchen, when a blasting sound was blown. Her head jerked up to hear it. She knew the signal, it was her lords. Bee glanced at her. Boisterous noises could be heard from the yard as the whole castle was woken up by the horn. She ran as fast as her bare feet could carry her across the castle grounds, passing through a sea of men struggling to get up from where they lay. Little Tim was already at the Barbican wall. She climbed to join him, looking 50 feet below, to a massive host of army that were coming closer to her lord's castle. She thought it was the invaders' men, until a sigil of blasting arrow over a green field among the waving banners caught her eye. However, they stopped even before reaching the gates. Not even close. What are they doing? Little Tim whispered. They stopped. Bee's eyes widened. Aren't they taking back this castle? No, she said, observing those men begin digging trenches. They are besieging us. From such a distance, she could hear the faint noise of laughter, carried by the wind. It was too late now for the invaders to leave the castle. Will starve us, or we'll surrender first and open the gates, a lord shouted as she pushed the door open. Heads turned at her as a log of wood fell from the stack in her arms. We'll fight them, or we'll die trying. We won't surrender to tyrants. The host in front of the gates outnumbered us, another lord hissed. Our men are wounded. Exhausted. Hungry. My lords, the wolf called out, cold as midnight breeze, you're lucky this arrow is still in my body. If not, I've already stuck it in your heart. Get your men up. Put the wounded in the rear. Lord Bolton, can I trust you to lead these men? Lord Bolton looked pleased, while other lords were scowling. She watched the lords shuffled about in the chamber, the commotion of men taking up arms awaken in the castle. Orders were given, and soon she was left in the chamber with the wolf and the fish. Ida, the wolf called. She looked up from the hearth, to the wolf on the bed. Can you look in my clothes and find my belt? There's a blade tied to it. She easily found what he asked for. I heard you're an orphan. She nodded and put the sheathed dagger on his outstretched palm. When they charged into the castle, do you have a place to hide? She nods her head, the kitchen. He tried to smile through a weak sigh. Not good enough. Burn the highest tower when the wolf died. She recalled what the boy had instructed. That was why her lord's army came back, to wait until the wolf was dead. I'm going to die. I could feel it, he said, sighing. If anyone has to die, it should be me. Look at me. I'm old, why am I still here? The fish gave the wolf a sad smile. We'll pull that arrow out of you tonight, don't die. We'll fight together again. The Southron lords wavered, the wolf pointed out. If I died, You're not going to die. If I died, the wolf pressed on, you'll keep Myrcella Baratheon safe, until she is returned to her kin. I cannot trust this to others but you and your honor, uncle. The fish grimly nodded. Do you know, uncle, the wolf continued, looking intently at his dagger, a slender blade adorned with intricate design and carved oak handle. Once upon a time I told someone that I'll not die, not before justice is served, and, he hesitated and let the unfinished sentence hang in the air. Then he handed the dagger to the fish, who took it. The fish looked uncomfortable. Do I want to hear the rest of your sentence? Did it come out of your delirious mind? I just wish I won't be dead soon. She watched the fish dip the blade into a bowl of boiling water, just as the door opened to show little Tim holding a bowl of salt. Behind him was the giant and some men. They were preparing to pull the arrow out of him. Time has passed too long, the arrowhead must be removed. Lord, are you really going to die? She received glares from the fish for the question, but the wolf